And we'll call this city council meeting to order. First, if we will have a moment of silence. Thank you. We'll ask that Ms. Tackett lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. I want to welcome each of you here to the Georgetown City Council meeting for Monday, July the 8th, 2024. Once again, we're here to conduct business for the city of Georgetown. At this time, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Mr. Allen?
Here.
Williams Brent? Mr. Conway?
Here.
Present. Mr. Hampton?
Here.
Mr. Showalter?
Here.
Mr. Stone?
Here.
Mrs. Tackett?
Here.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the minutes from the past meeting?
Motion, Mayor. Second.
Motion made by Mr. Hampton, second made by Mr. Allen. Are there questions and or comments? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say likewise. You should have received your check registry through the communication by email. If you have received those, please raise your hand. Let the record reflect that all received. Thank you. At this time, we have public comments. Remind you that public comments, you have 4 minutes to state your business in front of this council. Please be mindful and please be respectful of that 4 minutes. Madam Clerk will keep the time for you, and when it gets close to that 1 minute, she will let you know at that particular time. We have Aaron Shue on the regional park.
Back again. Erin Shue, 108 Arrowhead Court. I understand that we're going to hear more about the proposed regional development this evening, and I'm really excited that it's on the agenda and that it's finally being discussed openly. That's really makes us feel like we're actually being heard. There are a few questions that I hope are addressed tonight. These are, every one of these have been posed to our elected officials at one point or another throughout this process, and have yet to receive a response. For number one, the MWM executive summary, which was disclosed through an open records request to Lexington and provided to this council on June 24th, states that the project has a potential to be 1,000 contiguous acres. So what are we really setting in motion here? Is this just the Wiles Farm, or is this a larger project? And at what point are we going to be told what the rest of it may be? Number two, who's asking for this? We're told repeatedly that there aren't any tenants lined up yet. The zoning quick sheet for BP1 designation that's being promoted states that within the permitted uses are energy plants and production facilities. What are we producing? One of the earliest rumors about this project was that it was going to be an electric vehicle battery factory for Toyota. I've been assured that's incorrect repeatedly, but when we see energy plant and production facility both on the list of approved uses, it does kind of beg the question. If this is BP1, why is it being listed as BIT and commerce on the comp plan? What's the difference? If it's not industrial, why is it referred to as industrial repeatedly on official documents about the project? Number four, in the fiscal year 2025 Appropriations Community Project Funding Interest Form, which was submitted to Andy Barr's office on March 20th, it states that the target completion date for this project is 2040. Who's going to pay to maintain these 503 acres for the next 16 years? Who's mowing the grass? Who's building the roads? Who's laying the pipes? Who's paying for all of this, especially if it is within the urban service boundary? And how much is that going to cost? Do we know? Number five, why have Scott County and the City of Georgetown officials released far less information than the other regional partners? I'm filling out the exact same forms using the exact same terminology. It's concerning that Madison and Fayette County are being more forthcoming than the people in our own county. Why are we paying a PR firm $4,000 per month to create a persuasive and cohesive storyline in a storytelling effort to persuade the public? That's a direct quote from the scope of work, but not releasing fundamental documents on this project when requested. And finally, who gets to decide? Once we move forward with this, with only 42% of the investment, what safeguards are in place to ensure the future control of this development remains within Scott County? These questions boil down to just a few. Who's asking for this? Who's paying for it? And who gets to decide what this community looks like in the future? As mentioned, I've previously posed every one of these questions at one point through this process or another. None of them are coming from left field. So I really hope that at least some of them get addressed tonight. As always, thank you for your time. If anybody has questions about any of the documents I've referenced in this statement, I'm happy to share. I brought receipts. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron.
Caitlin Tudor.
Good evening. Apologize for my tardiness. My name's Caitlin Tudor, and I wanted to speak on behalf of similar things as Aaron. Aaron is much more organized than I am. However, one of the things that I'm actually running for on my platform for City Council is that I listen to moms. I listen to the women of Scott County and of Georgetown. And I can tell you, there's a lot of PO'd women in this area. One of the biggest things is, we don't have enough things for our kids. One of the things is, they're taking up the farmland. One of the things is, we don't have adequate stuff that we currently have. One of the things that I recently saw that was mind-boggling to me is that one of the playgrounds here in Scott County had very, very significant damage to it. It was very obvious, it was very dangerous. Kids had no business playing on it. So a mom put it out on the moms group, blasted it all over within a week. It was interesting that Parks and Rec was taking care of it, that they had just supposedly received grant funding to take care of that. It's a little sad to me that people have to blast things to get things done, that people have to go alternate routes to have things done. One of the biggest complaints right now is parking downtown. It's craptacular. I mean, absolutely horrible. There's no parking. And so our friends, our boutiques, our businesses on Main Street that thrive with walking traffic from tourism, where are people going to park? I don't know. I live 2 blocks away, so it's not a big deal for me. But where are they going to park? Nothing was talked about with the business owners from what I can tell. Everything is shut down. I'm also concerned because in a town like Georgetown, where we have lots of money flowing through, lots of opportunities, lots of families, lots of opportunity for a lot of outside things coming in, why don't we have some sort of, I guess, conference center or amphitheater or outdoor space that can be used for multiple avenues of different kinds of events, different things? My husband and I travel a lot, mostly for his job, but we recently took a cross-country trip. I was in Deadwood, South Dakota. Has anybody heard of Deadwood, South Dakota? It's an awesome little town. I loved it. It was fantastic. They had the coolest little center of town amphitheater, courtyard, restaurants, places to sit, places to eat. Like, it was just so cool in Deadwood, South Dakota. We have nothing like that here. Nothing. And it's really, really, really frustrating because taxpayers are paying everything. They're the ones that are ultimately paying for this potential industrial thing that nobody really knows about. They're the ones that ultimately are paying for the structures and the rehabs and everything of that nature. But nobody knows really what's going on until after the fact. And it's super frustrating. So, as somebody who is trying to listen, I can tell you that there's people that are really, really upset and really frustrated at the fact that people don't know where the money's going, people don't know why things aren't better, and there's no real reason. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. At this time, we will have the couple comments. Before I get into the regional economic development update, the fire department promotional pinnings, Chief Thompson. Okay.
Substitute for Chief Thompson.
You're going to substitute. Okay. Chief Johnson.
Yeah, go ahead. Let's go ahead and bring everybody in. If the pending recipients want to maybe make their way down here. Come on, can't hide. Yeah, before. Please.
Front and center there, big guy.
Come here.
Huh? Oh, no.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Mayor Jenkins and Council, for this opportunity. I'm here tonight substituting for Chief Thompson, who could not be here because of a family emergency. However, I know he sends his support, and it's an honor of mine to be here to help pin these four fine gentlemen. These guys have been in their new positions for quite some time, and we're finally able to coordinate everyone's schedules to be here this afternoon. Throughout the years, I personally have enjoyed watching each of you grow as a firefighter and ultimately into the person you are today. You should be proud of yourselves for achieving your new position and overcoming any sacrifices that were made along the way. First, we will start with the newly promoted engineers. This is a first for the Georgetown Fire Department, and we are grateful for the support from the mayor and from the council in recognizing the importance of this position and what it will bring to our department. Our three engineers are Mr. Corey Thomas, Mr. Dudley Glass, and Cam Collins. Here for Mr. Thomas, I believe, is his wife Leah and son Street. I know we had some issues with these last time, so I made sure they'll open for you. Oh, hold on, I'm sorry. I gave you the wrong one. Because they have numbers on them. Now, this is your opportunity with that pin there. Do what you want. And here to pin Cam Collins is his wife, Sydney. And here to pin Mr. Glass is his wife, Chelsea, and daughter Adeline. Is she gonna do the pinning? The little one? She can help out my Yeah. You all stay up here. Congratulations to the three engineers, and we wish you nothing but the best. Next, it's also an honor of mine to recognize our newly promoted captain, Mr. Lincoln Bruin. Captain Bruin has served with the Georgetown Fire Department since, what, you're about a toddler when Chief Bruin was around, right? No, in all seriousness, he's been with the department since 2014, and here to pin him today is his wife, Brianna, Briar May, and Allie Jo. Sticky. Get a picture. Thank you all. Congratulations. Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you, Chief Johnson. It's well deserved, and want to continue our support for the Georgetown Fire Department and all what they do for this city. Next is item B on the agenda, which is the Regional Economic Development Update. But before I talk a little bit, go into that, before we start that presentation and so on, I want to make sure we're clear on a few things. We all know about this particular initiative. I want to thank Judge Covenant for being with me. I invite him for this to help us answer questions on this particular project. At the presentation, we're going to be giving you, actually, Emily and Devin, with the presentation, will answer as to the actual product itself, as to the process and the statute and law of this and how it works. This is, as you know, is the Kentucky Product Development Initiative, which is a joint effort with me and the county. And so we want to make sure that you all hear exactly the information that needs to be brought to you all. And we're trying to do this in a fashion where you know what's going on. And that's the idea here. And at the end of this presentation, you will be able to ask questions, and hopefully we can answer some of those questions at this time. So at this time, I'm going to ask that you all go ahead.
All right. If you could go to the next slide. Sorry, it's my first time up here at the podium like this, so give me a second. Okay. So like Mayor Jenkins said, we are here just to really give an overview about the process, explain some of the different components of this regional project, the conceptual project, talk about the legal authority that allows for it, fill in some of the gaps on the history, some of the facts of how we've gotten to this point. And so generally there's three big issues that we're going to touch on. One, the KPDI program itself, regional business park authorities, and then just kind of running through the legislative timeline, how this council has essentially
gotten to this point,
Yeah.
essentially, in the process, and
Yeah.
some of the actions that have been taken previously, and just kind of giving that recap for the council and the public. Obviously, this has been going on for an extended period of time, so that history is always helpful.
And we're lawyers, right? There's a disclaimer on the slide. So we are providing this update to give information. Just because we're giving information here, that does not necessarily take the place of the ability to lawfully withhold, or when it comes to documents and information, that may not be the time to release that publicly. So anything that we say here today, just know that is independent from the Open Records Act and the other, I guess, the legal realms that we're operating in here. So, all right.
Yeah, tough act to follow with all the cute firefighter children. We didn't bring any cute kids. It's not as fun of a presentation. It's a little bit boring and dense, but we'll make it as fun as we can. Like Mayor said, there will be opportunity at the end for the council to ask questions. If you could just note your questions until the end, just so we can get through the presentation and give ample time for that kind of discussion to occur. As Emily said, the Kentucky Product Development Initiative program is one component that we really want to line out for you all to understand that KRS Chapter 154, stemming back from 2022, the General Assembly created this program to support economic development and quality job growth, emphasis on the word quality. This program wants to provide high-paying quality jobs. It wants to help recruit business to Kentucky. Obviously, the General Assembly, they don't favor Scott County versus Bourbon County versus Fayette County or any county. They want economic development in the Commonwealth. So goal of that program is to support site and infrastructure improvements to generate those opportunities. It's a collaboration between the Kentucky Cabinet for Economic Development, so KEDFA, and Kentucky Association for Economic Development. So those those organizations, obviously the General Assembly created the legislation, and those regulatory branches of government kind of administer the program. They allocated $100 million total funding for eligible projects over 2 rounds. So I don't mean to bring up failures, but we did actually apply for round 1. I thought Jack did a great job on that application. It just wasn't ripe for funding. As you all know, we were awarded funding in the Lanes Road Business Park Phase 3 project. So the program has been kind of circulating for those 2 cycles. But like I said, the goal is to create increased economic development opportunities, specifically in those named facets of the industry or the market. Emily?
So if you can, okay. So as Devin said, there was $100 million allocated for this funding from the state. The funding is awarded through a competitive application process with each of the 120 counties eligible for the maximum funding. That's an important designation here, that the program and the way it was developed was geared towards counties. It was then kind of pivoted, and you can see here there's an exception for counties that are participating in a regional project, and that kind of opened up the opportunity for government agencies to partner. Part of the program, with the money that would be awarded, there is a dollar-for-dollar local match, and that funding can come from local governments, companies, utilities, a lot of different partners in the community who are essentially invested in the growth and development of the community and want to see success with some of these projects that are eligible. The funding, if awarded, could be used for due diligence studies, property acquisition, expanding infrastructure, just getting the site ready. That would include road improvements, so sewer, water, electricity, all those sorts of things. And then ultimately, the funding recommendations, they're based on that expected return on investment, which is measured in the job creation and the capital investment. And so that's economic development terms, return on investment, job creation, but it really is driven towards what projects are you going to see essentially the biggest benefit from its return. If we award this, if the state awards this funding, where are they going to see the maximum return from that investment? And that being people getting jobs, having that money turn over in the community that can be used to then further develop the community.
And just to add to that, it's not on the slide, but looking just at the basics, the name of the program is Kentucky Product Development Initiative. And if you listen to Jack Connor, any economic developer, they say we need product. We need product in our community. And so what this program is aiming to do is to provide those sites so that when people come knocking on the door, which they do, I know that we've had to, based on lot size and limitations with the existing property at Lanes Run, we've had to turn down folks who want to come to our community. So it's about having that product available and then bringing those partners in. So I think that's an important thing to note. Is it sounds basic because it's just part of the title of the program, but it's important to acknowledge that if you don't have the product, they're not going to come to your community.
So on the last slide, I made reference to a regional project. So the cabinet has emphasized collaboration with multiple counties, and again, that's to promote the regional growth and development for the state. I believe the idea, and we're not speaking on behalf of the state at all, but the idea is, a region growing together and the benefit, the communities working together is more attractive to these companies who then developing one small site in a single community. It's attractive, it gives more opportunity, and it just shows that the community as a whole on a larger scale is willing and open and ready to support these companies and have them be a part of their community. So the applications for regional projects, as opposed to just a singular county, kind of like we did for Lanes Run Business Park, those regional projects allow available funding for the multiple counties to be combined, and that increases the maximum that's allowed for a given project. So on the previous slide, or slide before, we talked about how the maximum amount is $2 million. When you collaborate and you partner for a regional project, you're allowed to get more money awarded through this program, and having more money granted to you through the program allows you to do more with the project and get ahead without having to depend on your own local sources of funding. And then just definition of the regional project there. It's a project that's proposed by an eligible grant recipient residing in different counties in Kentucky who submit a single grant application. So when we talk about co-applicants, we're talking about the regional partners, and we'll get to that in a second, who submitted one regional application through this program.
Yeah, I think you covered this, but one add there is just that, talking about leveraging those capital dollars. So if $2 million is allocable to a maximum of $2 million to each county, if you have 3 participating counties, and you can get a maximum of $2 million on the program, 2 plus 2 for each county, that's a total of $12 million if everybody is equally at the table. That additional investment makes other funding agencies more interested in funding your project because you already have that strong leverage and strong base. So that's just one other component of how they're viewing regional projects and how both state and federal level folks are very interested in regional projects for that reason. So we've said regional a lot. Here's who we're talking about. I know this isn't new information, but looking at the county level, so we've got Scott County and City of Georgetown, Madison County, City of Berea, and City of Richmond, and then Lexington, Fayette, Urban County Government, being those 6 local government bodies who, subject to additional approvals and additional steps, of course, have expressed that they are interested at this point in being part of the conversation and part of that regional project. So I'm going to let Emily talk a little bit about the interlocal cooperation agreement component of this, because that is what is required to give these bodies the authority to enter into this kind of agreement and relationship.
Yeah, so legally speaking, the tool essentially that would allow this to come together is the Interlocal Cooperation Act, more specifically an Interlocal Cooperation Agreement. This act, the General Assembly created it with the idea that governments can work together, they can collaborate to make the most efficient use of their powers on the basis of mutual advantage. So factors that essentially are based on the needs and development of each individual community, but they can work together to just improve that for all the partners at the same time. We see this more typically, so I believe like code enforcement here locally, I mean, that's an interlocal agreement. That is, like I said, that's the tool that would be used to form this. The interlocal cooperation agreement is something that will need to be presented to you all as a legislative body here. You would have to approve that agreement. That is forthcoming. So just know, we're mentioning the interlocal cooperation agreement right now. We'll come back to it. But that is generally what will govern this partnership. The terms of how the partners work together, financing, who's allowed to do what, if a member wanted to withdraw for any reason, that sort of thing. All of this is governed in this agreement. That agreement, under the KRS 65, there are specific requirements that agreement must meet in order for it to come together, and then it will be submitted after each legislative body, if they approve this agreement, would be submitted to the Department for Local Government, and they will vet it to make sure it meets all the requirements of the statute, meets the spirit of this cooperative energy, and then once they approve it, that's when that would go into effect. I'll come back to that, I promise.
Yeah, like Emily mentioned, you all are very familiar with interlocals. We have many of them with the Scott County Fiscal Court, some with Stadyville and Stamping Ground as well. So obviously that's something that will look a little different with all those partners, but DLG serves as that regulatory agency that makes sure that everybody's doing what's required under the law and that the state's intent was met. So looking at the PDI application timeline, back in June 2023, that regional PDI application was submitted for round 2 of KPDI funding. In December, there was a recommendation, the cabinet procures a third-party independent site selection consultant that goes and visits sites and determines which applications merit moving to the due diligence stage. So our project made it to that stage, and then you'll see TBD 2024. We've alluded to a lot of other things that have to happen before this TBD occurs. So at that point, when other items are satisfied, cabinet officials would consider the full regional KPDI application, and then that final stage of due diligence would occur if the project were recommended for approval by KEDFA, Kentucky Economic Development Finance Authority. So that's a step that, like we've said and we'll continue to say, a lot of this depends on, one, approvals from this body, but 5 other legislative bodies. So there are a lot of moving parts, and want to make sure that everybody understands that this timeline's a little bit tenuous because all of those other factors have to be satisfied.
So we'll kind of move into the next section of the presentation, which is about the Regional Business Park Authority. There's a lot of conversation about industrial development authority. That language stems from the title of a chapter in KRS that the General Assembly has created. So KRS 154.50, 301 through 346, that is the Industrial Development Authority legislation. Just because it says industrial development, it is not necessarily industrial. It has to do with industrial and commercial development. But this legislation, it exists to create authorities to aid in the acquisition, the retention, and the development of land for industrial and commercial purposes. It supports the development and promotion of sites. So it's kind of the idea, you can acquire the land through this body, they can help develop it, and then when you get to the point where you're ready to sell the land and actually have tenants move in and have it be functional, they can help in that marketing in that transaction there. And then they also do work as well. They can help kind of make recommendations based on what they're seeing for, they don't have control over how the property is ultimately sold and developed, but they can make recommendations to the legislative bodies about potential tenants and the best use of the land and that sort of thing. Finally, they do promote and stimulate the acquisition, retention, and development of the land for the industrial and commercial purposes. And they work with other organizations as well. So they can partner not just with the local governments, but they could partner with other organizations in the community or at the state or federal level to help with that, those processes. So if we'll go to the next slide, I've kind of tried to break this out into three buckets essentially. So there's the establishment of the Business Park Authority, which again under the state law, and that is where the legislative bodies of the different partners come into play, the creation of the authority. I'll come back to that, but the second column is the appointment, and this is essentially how the membership of the authority comes together. That falls within the executive function, so the mayor's and the judge's executive. And then the last column, it addresses the administration, so basically how, once appointed, once formed, how the authority would essentially work. So hopefully this makes sense. So under the establishment, business park authorities, they're established by act of the respective legislative bodies. These don't come into existence unless a council or a commission, depending on the form of government, allow for it to through some type of legislation. They are, under the statute, they're allowed to be composed of 6 to 8 members, so there is a cap on membership. And we'll come back to that number but in a few slides, but this is something that under the state law, that is the number of members that you can kind of pick and choose based on the needs of the community or the communities involved and the representation that's needed there. Under the middle bucket, appointment, like I said, under the statute, the authority members, they are appointed by the mayors and the judges executive. That's not any different from how most of the appointments are made, where the mayor or the judge executive gets to basically make the recommendation and appoint someone to fill a board or commission seat. Under this legislative scheme, though, you can have joint appointments in that sense, or you can essentially create a membership agreement between the government agencies that are partnering for the project, and that agreement will dictate how the seats are filled. So I don't want to get ahead of myself, but just keep that in mind. There will be a membership agreement that I think that is the recommendation, just due to the number of partners that are in this. That would be the way we would go. So just keep that in mind. Under the administration, so these business park authorities, they are separate bodies from the governments that created them. So you'll see at the bottom, special purpose governmental entity. Once they are organized and formed, they do operate separate from all of the partners in the community or for this project. They will get to elect their officers, so a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary treasurer. So like I said, the mayors and the judges executive, through potentially a membership agreement, will get to identify the people who will be on this board, but they will self-elect who their chair, vice chair, and that sort of thing is, and that's under the statute. As their own legal entity, they're able to enter contracts, so they can hire an attorney, they can hire a CPA, they can hire services and different vendors to help them carry out their work and their functions. They can hire employees. I think probably what most people think of is you would have maybe like an executive director who is kind of doing the day-to-day. It's hard for board members sometimes to do all of that stuff. That's kind of the concept there. And then as far as what the statute provides for, with some of the legislation we can provide for more how we need to meet the needs of our community. At least once annually, they will have to submit a detailed report, basically of everything they've been doing the last year, so financial activities, that sort of thing. They would have to report that to all the legislative bodies. You have the ability to impose more frequent reporting, different types of reporting, but under the statute, that at least is the baseline. So there will be, at least annually, some type of communication back if this is formed. Just trying to paint the picture of what we're looking at. For the special purpose governmental entity, that designation is important because essentially they're only formed for essentially the service that they have been formed to do. So they don't really have authority to go out and just do whatever they want. So here, we're going to layer some of the statutes. So we have that Industrial Development Authority Act, and then we have, just keep this in mind that as we're kind of putting this project together, we are creating kind of a lane in which this business park authority, and it's in the scope of this regional project, but essentially what their limitations are, keeping their tracks on the, or their tires on the tracks, that sort of thing, to make sure that they're operating within the law and doing what they're supposed to be doing. With that designation as an SPGE, they will also have some additional reporting to DLG, the Department for Local Government, that I had mentioned before. So there's some additional oversight to make sure that they are meeting the requirements of this type of authority under the law. Is there anything you want to?
No, I think it was important that you referenced kind of the weaving together of all these statutes. We referenced the Interlocal Cooperation Act, the Industrial and Commercial Development Authority Acts, and then the SPGE designation, which is really critical. If you ask anybody who's an SPGE about their reporting requirements, they'll sigh. But weaving all of those together and creating this very specific lane is something, it's a little bit of a dance, but it's important to know that all of those different statutes govern these relationships. So it is very specific. There are some additional requirements that we can impose beyond what the statute does to provide additional oversight or information to the local governments to understand where their return on investment is, how the authority is operating, and giving the opportunity to know whether you're happy or dissatisfied with how the arrangement's going. So those are things that we want to keep in mind moving forward.
All right, next slide, please. So just a little bit more information. So once the authority's formed, a big question is, how do they pay for things? So under the statute, the legislative bodies that essentially form the authority, they may, earmark money annually. So the authority may receive an annual appropriation, and that appropriation is in such amount, in such proportion, and upon such terms as the elected legislative bodies impose on that appropriation of money. That money can be sent to them for the purchase of property, and just essentially to allow them to develop these different sites or parks. So like I said, that's may. It does not say legislative bodies shall make annual appropriations, but just that's the kind of the funding there. The authority, they are separate bodies, so they are able to apply for grants. They can apply for state, federal, or other local funding. They can borrow money. They can issue notes and other financial instruments on their own credit. Again, they are separate from the government here. So they may also issue revenue bonds. That is something that they could partner with the local government partners on that, or they can issue it on their own. And then the authority itself, the revenues that they collect, they're exempt from taxation. So just trying to walk through the different funding mechanisms for this authority, because it will have to, at some point, become a little self-sufficient and have the funding to help it do what it needs to do.
Yeah, and that's where those disbursements to the local government entities will start rolling as the authority becomes self-sufficient and is able to satisfy all those obligations. That's where the return on investment would come into play for the local government entities. So on the proposed revenue sharing slide, one other disclaimer, obviously, this is an illustration for our discussion purposes, subject to approval of the interlocal cooperation agreement by all the jurisdictions, and subject to additional funding being appropriated by the City Council and any other body who has not submitted enough funding to match its percentage allocation of the project. So we use the words host community because with this authority, it is not tied to a property. It is a corporate body that can acquire additional properties. So if in the future there is a host community, you can call the host community one of these other counties at some point if they are able to acquire property through the authority. So right now, host community contemplated is Scott County. So that revenue sharing, 10% off the top would come to this community based on the policing, administration, different challenges that come with being a host community. And then from that point, the percentages of revenue would be distributed pro rata among the communities per their capital investment. So this assumes that 30% of the cost, or 33%, I guess it would be because we're taking the 10% off the top. It assumes that Scott County, Madison County, and LFUCG all contribute 1/3 of the capital investment, ignoring any grant funding that we might get in the future. So that percentage would go, would start at each county level at 30%, and then it would be distributed to any cities within that county based on their contribution. Next slide, please. And then just that legislative timeline we talked about, just flashing back to just over a year ago, June 14th, City Council expressed support for the application. So obviously that was that very initial phase application prior to the site selection group assessing those submittals. Council expressed intent to provide funds in the amount of $562,500 subject to budget amendment and acceptance of the grant award in the future. So that's obviously something that's not occurred just yet. And then that same meeting committed to evenly share the cost of the option contract with the county, subject to fiscal court sharing the cost, subject to budget amendment approval, and in a maximum amount of $115,000. And then February 12th, 2024, council designated the mayor as the authorized representative and signatory as we move forward towards the formation of the Regional Business Park Authority, and then committed to reimburse a portion of the due diligence costs because once that site selection group had selected our proposed project, due diligence contracts had to be, or a due diligence contract had to be entered into. So that amount was not to exceed $64,000 and change for that component. And I think the next slide is questions. Thank you all for holding questions throughout the presentation so we could run through that. I know it's really dense, a lot of citations to statute, a lot of information, but appreciate y'all listening and take any questions at this time. I know, as Mayor mentioned, he invited Judge Covington to be here as well. Since this project has been a partnership, it did start at the county levels based on the way the KPDI program runs. So thank you to Judge and Mayor for giving us this time and also for accepting any questions at this time.
Thank you. Yes. Okay, Judge Covington, if you would come to the podium, please.
Make a few comments and try to answer your questions. Thank you all for having us, and we're all here because we care about Scott County and Georgetown, period. I mean, we're all here because of that. And this matters very much, and I'm very sensitive to the concerns. And I think everybody's sensitive to concerns, and we want to minimize impacts that might be, negative. But we also want to talk about the positive side of this. And the number one function of county government, city government, local government is to provide services. And I'm very proud of the services that Scott County Physical Courts provides and the city of Georgetown as well. I think we do a great job. Those costs will never be less than what they are today. And one of the best ways for us to continue to provide excellent services is to add good, quality, diverse jobs. And this is an opportunity for us to do that. The other aspect that I think is so important and we cannot overlook, I was at the chamber luncheon today, and Superintendent Billy Parker talked about, we're right at 800 graduates per year. Over the next 6 years, that's almost 5,000 young people that are going to be graduating from high school. 5,000 that need a job. And I can promise you, I'm the father of 3. Those moms that Caitlin spoke about, they want their children to have opportunities here. So those are things that we have, the positives of this opportunity. And it's what it is, an opportunity. And please know that it's important to me, important to the court, that we try to minimize the impact. And that's why we're not here promoting heavy industrial prospects. We're talking about items and opportunities that would fit in the BP1 designation, just like the Lanes Run Park. And Lanes Run Park has been a success. And we cannot wait until we have 0 land in Lanes Run to look at where do we go next. We have to look forward now. And when the KPDI program came up, it was a great opportunity to work collaboratively with other communities and not compete against each other, but work together. And by working together, we're going to be so much stronger on federal and state grant opportunities. We will compete for those monies. And every grant dollar that comes in will help move us forward to getting this into a reality and getting real jobs here. And every grant dollar that we recognize will leave general fund dollars in our coffers, in our budgets, that can help support quality of life and important infrastructure projects. And we're really stretching our dollar here by collaborating. And I would not be here today asking City Council to consider going forward just with us two as partners. It would be too big a stretch and too big a gamble in my mind. But collectively and collaboratively with these other communities, the investment is spread out amongst other communities. And then, the formation of the regional business park or the regional business park authority is going to form an umbrella. And there will be opportunities in the future for other sites. But we have to start somewhere. And when we started, we were looking in multiple counties. This particular site was for sale. It's the right size, and it checked all the boxes. It's on the bypass. But we have looked from one end of Scott County to the other, I promise you. And this is the best site for this project. And limiting it with the BP1 designation protects those impacts. It limits those impacts. And I just think it's the big picture, long-term project that helps move us forward and helps provide additional funding for potential jobs. And then, once we get this project moving forward, and let's just say in 10, 15 years, I don't know, I don't have a crystal ball, and it's up and running, we're seeing revenue, then it's a long-term success, but it's going to take time. And I can tell you this, my dad used to always say, Joe Pat, do you want part of something or all of nothing? And doing this regionally makes so much sense. It just does. It's a good business decision, in my opinion. And are there questions to be answered? Yes. And I don't have all the answers. But I do know that we all care about Scott County, and we all want what's best for our community and our citizens. So I'll try to answer questions and move forward and go from there.
Thank you, Judge. Before I start, I know there's pans down here, so again, just we'll take turns here. Mr. Showalter, you get your hand up first.
Well, I think
Right,
Mrs.
go ahead.
Amber did.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Ms. Hammer.
Thank you for the presentation. I appreciate it. I was wondering, when you say, I've heard that there are approximately 114 acres inside the bypass of this property and some outside.
I'll say
And some, obviously, is it true that the business park itself will be outside the bypass?
What
And
we've
there will be
talked-
114 acres inside the bypass that will not be part of the development, or is that?
Those 100 and so many acres inside the bypass, we've really not talked about. It doesn't make sense for it to be a part of the development and the business park. Those inside acres, in my mind, we need to consider what other uses might be positive for our community to look at. And then you're going to have to buy the whole thing because that was part of the option. But those acres inside, that's not really being considered for the business park development.
Okay, a follow-up question to that point then. The authority would have control, though, over the development of those 114 acres?
No.
No.
Planning Commission of Georgetown, Scott County
Would be able to.
is your
vote on it.
ultimate control.
Okay. And then it would ultimately come back to city council
Yes.
after that?
Ultimately, yes,
And
ma'am.
so we would be able to retain control over those 114 acres and the development going forward?
Yes. That is my opinion. And if we need to put
To me,
it
that's an
in.
important point.
Yeah, oh, it's huge. And nobody has ever talked about the 114 acres inside being part of a business park site development. It's always been part of everything outside. And there's that 100 acres that we need to look at what is an alternate use, what's other good uses for that. And if it needs to be spelled out into the interlocal, I don't have all the answers, Willow, about that, but if we need to spell that out in there, then let's look at how we can spell it out.
I think that would be beneficial from my small brain, but I think that to me is an very important point. If that can be spelled out in legal terms, to me, that would be a very good thing. And so if the 114, I hate to zero in on this though, but if the 114 acres is part of the original purchase and option, I don't understand how the authority is going to lose control over decision-making for that 114 acres.
Well, let's just say the authority would offer that up for sale for appropriate development, like
So we
maybe.
would have to buy it from the authority?
Who would have to buy it?
The
Ultimately.
city and county?
Ultimately, but we could spell that out hopefully we could spell out the intent for that in a document.
In the contract?
Yes.
Okay. That, to me, is something that I would like to see fleshed out further. And, you know, a lot of the same questions have been posed by citizens who've come repeatedly to council meetings. It would be helpful to me personally, as someone who's going to have to make a decision on this, if those could actually be answered. If the answers are there and the information is not protected, as Emily has talked about, Emily Buttram, let's just get it out there and answer them. Maybe they've been answered somewhere and I just haven't seen it. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. I don't think there's any subterfuge or non-transparency, but
I think the whole thing to start with, when you did the grant application and when you're talking about land acquisition,
yes, sir.
the first page of the grant application says confidential.
I know.
And everything they tell you is to keep it confidential. And then the concern about land speculators trying to buy up land around it. But this is the worst kept secret in the world. We went and met with the cabinet, and, we can, they essentially said, hey, you can share, but they want to make sure that that we communicate that ultimately the funding has not been approved through KEDFA. So we're awaiting KEDFA approval, but we're going through the due diligence of the planning. And we don't even have the interlocal hammered out. We've had a couple drafts,
Okay.
but when you're talking about multi-jurisdiction, multi-counties, multi-cities, and you're trying to navigate through that interlocal agreement, that once we get to a draft to present to you all in the physical court in the city of Richmond, the city of Lexington, then that document will be shared. But we don't even have a draft that's shareable yet. We're still pounding on it to make sure we get it right. And there's other examples to look at, and we're looking at other examples, but there's business parks all across the state that have multi-county and city partners that are working together.
And that was the other question. I don't want to dominate, but if we could see how some of those are working out and see how the revenue streams are from those, and I'm sure they're fairly new, but that would be helpful data for me.
Yeah, but I'll go back, and those are all good things. But I'll go back to this. If we do not have property that is shovel-ready, what the site selectors call, we will not compete. The dynamic after COVID has changed in this environment, and if we don't have this product, then we won't compete. And I think that's just a reality. And we are forging ahead, trying to put ourselves in the best position. And I think the best position is a regional cooperative partnership like what we're talking about. And the benefit is that we won't be competing with Lexington and Richmond and Madison County as much. We'll be collaborating. And then if we could get up and running, and if we had another site that operated under one umbrella, then we're just going to maximize that cooperation. And then I cannot stress enough the importance of being able to apply collaboratively for federal and state grants, and being able to use that money to offset general fund dollars. You try to put yourself in the best position to compete. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Showalter?
For every comment you make that you're making, an additional question pops up. So these are in no particular order. I want to go back to one of the slides that was discussed about the revenue split and try to get some additional information. Specifically, in this case, when you look at the city and the counties, they're split, that makes sense. But the host community, so if a business park comes to Georgetown that we're talking about right now, would the city and the county split 5% and 5%?
Yes, sir.
So for any occupational tax, net profits tax, or property tax, the city of Georgetown, in this case, would get 20% of that revenue?
10.
Would that,
10.
we'd get the 15% and then the 5% on the host
So
community?
if you look at the business park we're proposing, the 400 acres, then you look at the potential revenue from that. First of all, I believe the city would vote to annex that in. Is correct? And next, any of these streams of revenue that currently existing, the host community would take, get that 10% off the top of the revenue. Now, one of the things we've talked about, we can't take revenue until we pay our bills off. And it's a process. And, if you look at this and trying to phase it in, and it's a long haul. And just being 1,000 times transparent, before we see revenue, it will be a few years. And then we have to work and hustle to try to sell the position. But we are in a great spot to sell this opportunity to businesses. Location, location, location. You know, we're right here in between 64 and 75, able to get to the eastern United States in a day's drive. All those things add up. And then you look at the existing surrounding metropolitan labor force. You know, we are in a great spot to compete. But if we don't have the land, we won't compete. So but like long term, you know, initially here in Scott County, Georgetown and Scott County would, once we get to the revenue producing time, we would split 10% of any of those revenue streams. School board would still get theirs, library still get theirs, ag extension still get theirs, but we would get 10% off, and then you'd have 30, 30, and 30 divided of the remainder that's divided between the partners. And it's because we all want to, the goal of this and the discussion's been that we're equal partners going in and equal commitment of funds.
So let's say this does move forward. And
I'm sorry.
let's say this whole concept moves forward. And let's say 5-10 years down the road, Madison County is going to develop a business park in Madison County.
That's the hope.
What if that happens?
Yes.
Or Fayette County?
And that's possible as well.
We would receive.
So let's say Madison County in 10 years, or 6 years, 7 years, whatever it is, gets an option on a site, develops a site, does the same process. Madison County, Berea, and Richmond would split that 10% off the top. And then everything else would be the same, just like it is for us here. We would get, Georgetown, Scott County would split 15% of the revenue from that site in Madison or in Fayette. And it would be, it's all underneath that umbrella of the regional authority.
Yeah.
I do want to just reiterate, this illustration is based on just conversations right now. So if ultimately the percentage contribution of those communities were to differ, this chart would be adjusted. So this isn't going to remain uniform if Madison County isn't willing to pony up the proposed percentage on this slide. So it will all be adjusted based on capital contribution to the project.
Thank you.
So I think that what they mean, Billy, is that this is assuming that everybody's equal partners, that everybody puts their fair share in. So if Madison County or Berea decides they're not going to put as much in, then their profit sharing for this would be a little bit less. That's the thing.
But everybody has came to the table and pledged to be equal partners to this point, and that's the plan.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Mr. Connor, I know over the past year and a half, I think in every interlocal committee meeting,
You know, we're going to address
well,
questions with here.
I am going to address it to the judge, but I want,
Oh, okay.
at least if nothing else, somebody to at least acknowledge this. You mentioned this in the beginning of your presentation, or when you got up to speak. If the economy keeps going as it is at the present time, realistically, or at Lanes Run Business Park, I mean, are we going to, more than likely, are we looking at maybe another 2 years or 3 years?
I would defer to
If the
Mr. Connor.
economy continues to go as it's going before that fills up?
I think the Mark and everyone else, we are looking at filling out Lanes Run within the next few years. I mean, there's only so many acres. Jack gets calls weekly about opportunities. It all has to kind of fit together like a puzzle. I remember not too long ago you called and shared that you had to tell a prospective client that you just did not have the land that they needed, and they mentioned, and we couldn't even compete with the potential opportunity. So, yeah, there's approximately 60 acres that has not been accounted, not bought or optioned on. Then Jack is working on 3 sites that are called pad-ready sites, and that's 24, 25 acres. And then the last of Phase 3 that we just got the PDI grant for is 80 acres or 72. So we cannot wait until we have none to make plans for the future. And I believe once our sewer capacity issues are successfully navigated in January, February of '25, I think our community will have another big jump in growth. It's just reality, and we need to have opportunity and options for community for potential business.
I've got one more question, then I'll stop. I know this has been a presentation on this concept, but I did hear earlier a question that was brought up on a piece of property. So am I able to ask a question on the property?
Sure. I mean, it's the worst kept secret.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
yeah.
So I can't speak for the rest of the council members, but, I've listened to everybody that has that have come before us over the last several months and have spoken. And these are these three items that I'm getting ready to mention are the three items I hope that we will address.
Okay.
If this continues to move forward. In no particular order. We've had discussion over the past year and a half about a fire station. Being able, if this continues to move forward, being able to set aside a certain amount of space or acreage for a future fire station, I think needs to be looked at. Second item, protecting the house, the historical house on the property, protecting that house to where it doesn't get torn down. Third item is offering protection or a boundary to the adjoining property owners, such as trees or burn, giving them privacy, maximizing privacy for the adjoining property owners. So those are the three items I hope we can address.
To speak to your three items, number one, it makes so much sense that if you're going to have a development there, you need fire protection. And everybody knows that the growth, one of the areas of concern is in West Georgetown as you go west. And that would be something as a request from the city council to consider carving out 5 acres and that the collective group make that a stipulation of moving forward. That's number one. Number two, you mentioned the historic house. We're aware of the historic house and are going to follow every rule and guideline. And what makes sense to me, where it's located on the parcel, is to carve off, 4 or 5 acres around that house and look at what funding can we pursue for historic preservation, and then what productive use could be of that house. But tearing it down is not an option. You just make it work with the development and then maybe enhance it. Because right now, it's there, but how can we enhance it? And by no means would we not follow federal and state guidelines in regards to that. And then number 3, you mentioned, help me go back, I'm trying to, berms. That's in the BP1
Right.
designation and screening. And I would be, how do you preserve the BP1, that there is so many more dedicated, and I don't want to use the word restrictions, but it really is requirements that you have these as part of your park, and trying to keep a good number of trees, and then have that berm, and then have connectivity with sidewalks. I've mentioned with you all before many times, we're working very hard to get the Legacy Trail. The construction hopefully will start in early '25, and get the Legacy Trail to Lyle Road Soccer Complex. And then the next step would collaboratively work with you all to get it from Lyle Road to Cardone. But a big dream would be for our community is how could we get a rails to trail, a bike path trail from Cardome to Stamping Ground. And if you look, the old railroad bed goes right through this. And what's in the future land use map that's proposed is it's carved out. That's carved out in this, in the proposed future land use map. So, you know, we want to be sensitive to the community that lives out there off Lloyd. I would never, and we will do everything we should. There should be no traffic going out on the Lloyd. When I was principal at the high school, I begged kids, don't drive to Lloyd between Scott County High School and ECS. So we had to put those guidelines, and planning and zoning will help us there as well. But that's been mentioned in this group, and they know that Lloyd, you know, that's not an option. So trying to be sensitive, trying to limit the impacts. And by not proposing heavy industrial development, you know, we're trying to be sensitive to that with the BP1 lanes run model. Lanes run model's been very successful, and I think we can copy that and improve on it even. So.
If I can just add to that, in addition to the development plan for the park as a concept, I mean, please remember that as individual lots are sold and developed, there will be additional opportunities through the planning and zoning process to make sure it's meeting requirements of the zoning, to put additional precautions if necessary, as recommended by the Planning Commission, or how that process works through, that could also build on the bigger protections that are put in place for the park. So keep that in mind, that there are other mechanisms down the road that would also help support that.
Okay, I see Mr. Hampton.
Yes, thank you. I want to address with Lexington, Fayette, Urban County. 5 miles up the road, they're developing a business park or industrial park on their own. Why would they want to be involved in this besides the tax revenue sharing? And what's in it for them? Is it going to compete against that?
You know, it looks down to the model and the cost per acre. The cost per acre at that site is going to be very high.
Yes.
The cost per acre that we're proposing will be less expensive and be more, you know, so in my mind, it'll be more attractive to potential businesses. You know, you look at Central Kentucky as a region, and you look at the ebb and flow of people going to Scott, you know, to Fayette County to work, Madison County to work. This was shared not too long ago, and you know, why Fayette County? You know, we have these county lines, but if you look, we depend on each other so much. I mean, for workforce, and we are a collaborative region for workforce. And I got to get my glasses out. But this is from, you know, you're looking at Scott County. Where are workers going and where are workers coming from? On a daily basis, the number of commuters coming from Fayette County to Scott County, 4,930. You look at Madison County, over 1,091 Madison County workers come to Scott County on a daily basis. You look at, you know, you can go up and down the list. And then Scott Countyans going to other counties, about 7,700 workers go to Fayette County daily. About 1,200 go to Franklin. And you get the gist of my comment, that we are a region already, and we need to work together collaboratively to try to maximize more job opportunities.
The question may be for Devin or Emily. In the agreement itself, will it address if one of the regional partners wants to pull out at any time?
Yes. So the Industrial Development Authority Act, there's actually a provision of that chapter that spells out what that would look like. There's steps they have to go through. The interlocal as a condition of the agreement, there has to be a provision that addresses withdrawal and termination. So those two chapters work together. I'm happy to provide that language to you to supplement this information so you can read it yourself and see it in context. But that is something that's required under essentially both chapters to account for that, and there's a procedure that's set forth in the law.
Okay. And just a follow-up, sort of maybe on the other side, but the authority will have the ability to borrow money. Did I hear that right?
That's a power granted to them under the statute.
Okay, and that would be, under whose bond rating would that be done? I mean, how would that work? Do we know?
I mean, so they're separate, independent, so they would have their own ability to do that on their own, but they could partner with any of these local governments. They're part of this and utilize what those governments have available to them, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So like, depending on how they would choose to partner, if they pursued bonding for this site, it would just depend on who the agency is that would agree to pursue that with them.
So if the authority, if this site just wanted to borrow money, it would be on our bond rating?
If the partnership was with the city of Georgetown.
Okay, yes.
They
Thank
could
you.
also look to the state as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's a good point. While the authority can go out to bond market, like you said, their rating isn't going to be as advantageous as maybe city council, fiscal court, all of these local government bodies who have a really strong rating. So that partnership would be something that obviously, whichever legislative body were to be involved, that would come back and have to be approved if that were to be pursued.
Mr. Allen?
Yeah, can we go back to the revenue sharing slide, please? So, and guys, you know, I would have loved to have this previous so I could formulate some questions. It's a lot of information to get and then try to formulate some questions. So I would hope in the future we would get these out a little bit earlier. But looking at that slide, 60% of the revenue would be leaving the economy, leaving our economy. That does concern me, because as I look at Georgetown getting 15% and then the additional 5% from the host community, I don't know if 20% will support the services that we need for a growing community that we have. As we continue to grow at over 2% a year, it strains our general fund, our revenue streams, to the point we're struggling now. So I don't know if that 20% would support the needed funds that we're going to have in the future. As Mark pointed out, an additional fire station, and there's additional services that we're going to have. So I would like to see hopefully some analysis that helps us see that a little bit clearer. The other point with this is Lexington-Fayette County, as I understand, is pretty much landlocked. And I don't know, again, Joe Pat, no one has a crystal ball, but if they're not creating revenue within their community, then we're just going to be looking at hopefully Madison, and I know Madison has some opportunities there. So that's a little bit concerning in terms of Lexington and Fayette County included in this, if they don't have the potential to create the revenue to help strengthen this and support it. And again, no one has a crystal ball, but I know that they're struggling with development, land to develop for business parks and industrial parks. So those are a couple concerns I have, and I think the governor is either going on a trip or already on a trip overseas to generate and recruit jobs for Kentucky. And I think if he has to have these types of information about land and acreage in his pocket to say, hey, I know there's 500 acres sitting in Georgetown, so that helps him to recruit jobs, and we need jobs. 48% of our budget is based on occupational taxes. We have to have jobs, and we cannot wait until the last minute or have the business lanes run business park fill up and then go forward. We have to do this now. I get that. We have to do it now. But I'm just a little bit concerned about the partners in terms of the potential revenue that Lexington Fayette County is going to contribute to down the road in looking at this. Did we look at Scott and Georgetown doing this alone? I mean,
as I've shared and talked to, if you look at the cost to do this by ourselves, estimates, I think it would be above 35 million. Then you look at the bond payment on that, and then you look at, there's no guarantee, I don't have a crystal ball. And it would be, I would not come and recommend that we do this by ourselves together.
I know. Yeah.
And it goes back, do you want part of something or all of nothing? And that's just the way I see it. And then you're being more competitive together for state and federal dollars helps reduce that burden on the general fund. And then if it just makes so much sense to me to be a regional partner, and I understand your concern and respect your concern 1,000 times, and I wish that number, but if you're going to be equal partners in an investment, then you got to divide it up some way.
And I get the equal partner thing, but again, I'm looking at Madison County has that opportunity to contribute. They've got land, they've got opportunity there. Lexington, Fayette, I don't know. Based on what I've heard, landlocked. So that's concerning from a stand of generating revenue that we can all share in.
Yeah, I can't stand up here and say I guarantee you anything.
Right.
Other than by putting this in motion, we give ourselves a chance to compete. And if we don't have it, then we don't compete. And time's going to keep moving, and those graduates are going to keep graduating. And you agree with that?
I get that fully.
Yeah.
I was in the same meeting with you today,
Yeah.
and I understand we want to keep people here. We want to have jobs. I get that. We've got to have good jobs. I was in a regional meeting, and Mercer County announced that they were purchasing 860 acres with the option to purchase an additional 100 acres. Now, they're doing that, Mercer and Harrisburg, together. So I asked, what about regional? And they said, we're doing this internally. So, and I know land is, doesn't cost as much in Mercer and Harrisburg, but that's what I'm saying. If we had the opportunity to do it in our house, city and the county, and then we're keeping the revenue internally, which we're going to need a lot of revenue to support the services that we're struggling to support right now. It's a huge concern I have.
And if we move forward with this proposed project, get it up and running, and then you look at an opportunity in Madison County under the same umbrella, it just makes sense to me. And I wish I could stand up here and tell you, hey, let's go do it ourselves. But I really do think too, there's two streams of revenue. We're talking about direct revenue, the revenue from tax and occupational license fee, et cetera. The indirect stream is like people buying food, buying gas, buying goods here in our community, moving to our community to work here. We all know that rooftops don't produce revenue, but by adding these jobs, that indirect stream, I think, is another thing that we need to consider as well. And it's hard to put a dollar figure on that.
And that's my concern, that 15%, is that going to support the growth that we're going to have? Because we're going to continue to expand. Our community is going to grow and grow and grow, which means we need more services for the citizens. So will that 15% cover the services that we need? We're struggling right now for a fire station, and that's what concerns me with this whole thing. And I know you don't have a crystal ball, no one does.
And it's a long haul project too, I think. It's the long game that we have to consider and look at. And then you look at the model from Lanes Run, and that's what we're trying to reproduce. And
Lanes Run doesn't have an authority, right? That's just city and county.
that is correct.
So that's,
No, it does. It's under the Lanes Run
But
Business
it-
Park
yeah,
Authority.
but it's city and county.
But it doesn't, it's
It
not
doesn't have a
a,
lot of different partners.
It's not a
like-
regional authority,
Right,
correct?
it's not a
a
regional.
It's a local authority.
Money stays here.
Right.
And again, that's my big
But
concern.
the Lanes Run is not an IDA. I think that's the correct way to say it.
but
Lanes Run is not an IDA.
It's city and county interlocal agreement.
Yeah.
And I would just hope that I struggle when I see it 60% going out.
All right. Okay,
Mayor, if I could,
yes, Mr. Stone.
one thing you mentioned, it's a long time before the revenue comes in, correct?
It will be a few years, I believe.
We're struggling to get money in now, so we're gonna shell out a whole lot of money on this gamble. And when we need money coming in, and we're just gonna keep shelling it out once a month, making payments on something that 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever, correct?
I have no ability to sit here and tell you that you're going to realize a gain within X years. But I can tell you that if we don't have land available, we will not compete, period.
Absolutely, and I agree with that. But what I'm getting at is that we're struggling with money, and we're gonna shell it out to buy this property, and, you know, we need fire stations, we need this, we need this, we need this, but we're gonna, instead of putting it on things that we need, we're gonna gamble on a risk. Next thing, near and dear to you, what about school traffic? We're gonna put all this business park right in between two high schools and an elementary school with semis coming in and out of there and people coming in and out of there?
You're going to put development there, and the bypass was built for this purpose. And you look at Lanes Run, the traffic coming out of Lanes Run, it's a different time than when school's released. And I would say this too. This property is going to be developed, period. It's going to be developed. And what we are proposing will be less of an impact on traffic than 2.9 trips per day for, I would be very, very conservative in saying, 1,500 houses. And then you've got 3 drivers per house, 2 drivers per house, and the traffic would be less of an impact with a business park model than with a large residential subdivision.
I agree with that, but you're also gonna throw in semis too, coming and going, so,
Yeah.
but that's another thing, so. It's just, comes back to me, it's a long time before revenue, and that's a whole lot of money going out that's not coming in, so, that's all I got.
All right.
I have somebody that's interested in buying all 500 acres for a horse farm. But that's not 1,500 houses.
Well, Ms. Conway, it was up for sale.
I didn't even know about it. It was all quiet until
Well,
I,
there-
on the market.
Okay, okay.
Well, until I started hearing,
It was on the market.
No, you're fine. Just make sure everybody goes one at a time
Yeah.
here so we can hear.
I just wanted to.
And when the KPDI came up, it looked like a great opportunity, and we looked at the option.
Can I finish what I was saying?
Sure.
Okay. Talking about a park, industrial business park, talking about it, land has to be sold, they're gonna sell it. I know the family personally. Okay, they're gonna sell it. And this option that if it's not the business park, then you'll have a situation possibly like the Colony that was brought up with 1,500 houses. There's another option. Somebody is willing to pay, they talked to me about it, the same amount of money per acre and buy all 500 acres for a horse farm. Just throwing that out there. Just wanted you to know.
Okay, Ms. Tackett, you have a question?
Yeah. I think, first of all, what we're talking about is our future for Georgetown and Scott County, correct?
Yes.
And in saying that Lanes Run Business Park, we have approximately 120 acres, and 72 of that is developable, which will probably be done within the next 2 to 3 years, because we've already said and moved forward that we're going to finish Phase 3. But in the process of all of that, that's where recurring revenue comes from, to have the services that we have, and to be able to, down the road, hire firemen and things like that. So when we're talking about a regional business park, would it be safe to say that Lexington, even though they're going to get 30% and they're landlocked, aren't they going to still be putting money into Madison County from their funds, their grant funds? And so when we're talking about the money, we're going to be getting $12 million. That's almost going to pay for the land, and then we'll get money, probably federal money for infrastructure down the road. So we're not really going to be putting any money out of our coffers right away, correct?
We would try to pursue those federal and state grants initially to try to offset costs. And if you look at the KPDI, what's been proposed, and it's not been funded, but you're looking at $4 million from Madison County with the $2 million plus a $2 million match from the entities. Then you're looking at $4 million from the $2 million from Fayette County and their $2 million match. So right there, we're talking about $8 million coming into our community to offset costs initially. And then I just want to say it again, we would not compete for these federal and state monies by ourselves as well as we're going to collectively as a region.
Because the federal government supports the regional idea.
And the cabinet, the economic development cabinet, the governor's office, they have, Mayor Jenkins, would you like to comment on how much?
You know, when we had that meeting with Secretary Knowles and others, you know, one of the big things they brought to the table is that, you know, the regional concept is where the idea of it, they want these communities, the cities to work together, because they feel that they get more bang for their buck if they are able to leverage funds for, just like Andy Barr and others, if they're able to Madison, Fayette, Scott, Richmond, you know, for them, it means more for them, and it means that we're able to get that. We're not going to, you know, I've heard this too, where people talk about, well, we can do this by ourselves, but, you know, I don't think we can, because the cost of it is significant to do this. And, you know, to go to the state and to try to leverage funds from them, it makes sense for us to have this regional concept. So we can actually go to them and say, hey, we got people involved in here. This is not just Georgetown, Scott County. This is Fayette, this is Richmond, this is Madison. We're all trying to come in and help you bring in jobs from other parts of the country to come to Georgetown, come to Scott County, come to Richmond, come to Madison. That's the idea. And we're all going to be if this all works well, we're all going to be putting up a minimal amount versus us trying to put this together and putting a lot involved. Excuse me.
Mayor, can I add one thing to that, just to address something Councilwoman Tackett said? In terms of that initial capital investment actually coming out of city dollars, I mentioned in one of the slides was that pledge of, I think, $562,000 and change. So that initial, there's still a vote to occur. That's the only funding that the council has approved to date, subject to KIDFA approval and subject to budget allocation. But that additional funding that will be required to put the city of Georgetown / Scott County on that level to evenly share those revenues is something that will have to be pledged. In addition to that, will hopefully come those federal dollars, additional state dollars that the mayor and judge have talked about leveraging. But I do want to clarify, there will have to be a little bit of additional capital from the city of Georgetown to reach those percentages in terms of revenue sharing long term.
So I just want to make sure that I understand the concept as to what you're saying. So you're in the middle of due diligence, and if the land is purchased, there's an interlocal agreement that's being between all of the people that are involved. That's being hammered out right now. Once that becomes final and we approve that, then the authority board is the next thing that's going to be appointed in order to be under this umbrella. And then as we move forward, the property is going to be developed at some point. And it's going to be in the concept of like Lanes Run Business Park, only much bigger, but in that same context where it's not going to be industrial, they're going to keep it B1. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and then moving forward, the reason why we're considering doing this is so that we can have recurring revenue from jobs, because that's the only way we're going to get recurring revenue, because it's not going to come from Lanes Run Business Park once it's dead if we don't move forward. So we're not going to be able to have the other things that we're talking about as far as spending money on other things. If we want an amphitheater, or if we want a convention center, which I would love to have all of those things too, but those are capital projects. Doesn't have anything to do with the recurring revenue, correct?
Correct.
We have the recurring revenue coming forward so that we can continue to retain our police officers, firemen, and EMS services, our first responders, and to make sure that we can retain them and to continue to recruit, right?
So Connie, looking at, what we've done with our local PDI application and award is the ability to finish out that phase 3. And let's say we add another 400 jobs with the remaining, all that revenue will come to us. And that's why we felt compelled that we had to finish out Lanes Run and develop what we had, but we also couldn't pass on this regional opportunity. So we split our PDI. That's what we've committed, that's what we did in the application. And the thought process has always been that we'd all be equal partners, county by county. And that's why we'll have to have the initial investment from commitment from you all and commitment from physical court. But, our commitment there at Lanes Run, if Jack gets a call tomorrow and we've got somebody wants 60 acres of phase 3, but you can do it soon. So that's, and that will help move us forward. But in the big picture, this regional project, coupled with the opportunity down the road to have another site in another county with revenue coming from that, that's why I look at this as an opportunity for us to consider. And I don't have all the answers, and we all care about what's going on. It's important. But I just go back to, doing nothing's not an option.
Right.
It's not. And this is a great opportunity, in my opinion. And I just want the best for everybody, and to have opportunities. And I don't want, I don't want to put big impacts. I'm very sensitive to that. And that's why we're not talking about industrial there. We're talking about the BP1 lane runs model.
But I do have the right concept in going for, and
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
Mayor, one quick thing, and I know I can't ask Jack, so I'll ask you, so Jack can give you the answer. How many acres are we using in Lanes Run Business Park? When it's all said and done, how many acres will we be using in that park?
What,
3
300?
phases.
350?
350. By what Joe Pat has said here, we're gonna get 376 acres out of this one, out of the 500.
It's 392.
No.
It's about 392 on the outside.
You said 114 is gonna be cut off across the road.
And
10 acres, or 5 acres cut out for the house.
Todd, I'm not going to. I mean,
We're spitballing here. And 5 acres for a fire station. And I know that those numbers will fluctuate. So, but that's the numbers that we're looking at. So,
Okay.
I know that we won't need a whole 5 acres for a fire station. It'll be one acre at best. The house may only get 3 acres. So, but we're still going to be in the roughly same size as. So, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Jack.
but also, and Chase has a veto sitting back here. I will say the improvements that are done for the infrastructure at this proposed park will benefit the whole community, especially in that area. And I think you could nod your head to that, couldn't you? So, that's another aspect that the regional park, this investment that infrastructure will assist and it make improvements that will benefit all of Scott County.
Mayor, do we have a projected cost on the infrastructure?
Not Tim. I'll get that for you.
Well, just a projected cost.
And Alonzo, there's ballpark figures that's been, but it all depends on how you move forward, what phases and how much.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we'll look into that. I'll see if we can get some idea of what the ballpark figure would be for that.
I'm not against progress at all. I'm just not crazy about it being on that particular spot.
And I respect that 1,000 times,
I
and
really am not. So,
and I promise.
I'm not going to play a game here. I'm not up for reelection. I'm not going to try to worry about if I make somebody mad or not. I think we do need revenue. We do need businesses, just not there.
And I respect that, and I understand why, but I promise you, I have looked from one end to the other, and
There's nothing at northern Kentucky, northern side.
well, let's talk about,
The interstate?
let's look at Sadieville. There is no sewer capacity there, zero. I mean, zero. And then the other aspect is, we just got a grant from Congressman Barr to do the design and study to add sewer capacity in that northern 25 corridor. That will cost an estimated, to get that project done, it's a $30 million project itself. Correct? So I've looked at the interstates. I've talked to owners at the exchanges. Some won't even talk about selling. And then the price point, upwards of $60,000 or more an acre, compared to what we're getting the current proposed project at, is less than 20. It's right at 20. So when you look at that initial investment, and then you look at the cost to bring infrastructure to the different places, and the access off the bypass, that's how we got there. It's just, there's nothing. I mean, it's just, it was for sale, the proximity, the location, and then the cost. I promise you, I have looked high and low, and when you're talking about this price point for acreage, it is a real opportunity for the project.
Well, Judge Covington, once again, thank you so much for coming and so on.
Can I add one more point to that?
Yeah.
I know I've heard a couple of mentions from council members and others about potential sites in Sadieville. One important component of the revenue sharing concept and the revenues eligible to be accepted through the authority is that it's got to be eligible for annexation into the city of Georgetown. Otherwise, the only revenues it's eligible for are those within Scott County. So any property that couldn't be annexed, if it's not contiguous and adjacent to existing city property and couldn't be annexed, it would only be eligible for the county's 1%, and potentially the county's property tax. Wouldn't have any insurance premiums if those are eligible. So it would kind of limit the scope of the project as well. So that's just one other component to consider, because I have heard some folks brainstorming and bringing up some of those kinds of options.
Okay.
With the comments, is there any chance that you might be able to come back up to the podium? If that's,
sure.
Please. So I would like to direct my question towards Devin, since I can't ask the audience member a question. If we go back in the past and look at Lanes Run Business Park, when the city made an investment, the city made an investment to develop that park to what it is today, it was a pretty significant investment in the millions of dollars. And how many years was it before that first job was created? Once the construction began on that infrastructure.
I believe it was 2 years.
2 years. And man, I've heard some pretty remarkable statements tonight. And man, you think of what Country Boy and Ecofiber and Commonwealth Tool, just 3 examples of the tax revenue that they're producing for the city, not including the county. So, I'm not going to be here. But if we don't have vision to create jobs, I mean, Mr. Allen said it. We're struggling to pay our our annual expenses. And if you don't have the job creation, you've got two choices. And one choice is not popular because we've seen that over the past 15 months. There's been no appetite to do the things that we need to do. So to me, it's pretty clear. Now, again, I'm open-minded. I'm not closed-minded. I'm going to listen and get the facts before I make comments. And, you know, to hear, if I've heard it once, I've heard it a half dozen times over the last 60 to 90 days, that it's only the politicians that want this. That's not true. It's not true. We have to create jobs. We don't have to. We can stop it. I think it's something I'm hoping we take some votes later on, to be quite honest. Not tonight, but over the next few months, I hope we do. And to use the fire station as an example, we sat in a fire committee meeting less than a week ago. Yeah, less than a week ago. And the question was asked, what would it cost? What's the annual cost to staff a fire station? And it's somewhere between $1.4 to $1.6 million.
A year.
$1.4 to $1.6 million per year. That doesn't include construction of the fire station. That doesn't include buying a new fire truck. And the only thing I hear is, let's get a SAFER grant. Well, the SAFER grant is good for a couple years. But ask somebody that was around the last time we got a SAFER grant, and when that SAFER grant ran out, what did the city do? They raised taxes. So to me, it's a pretty simple process. Now, again, and Judge, I apologize, I called you by your first name. Judge Covington mentioned it earlier. I wasn't going to mention it. You know, planning and zoning is getting ready to have a vote on this property to come into the comprehensive plan, I think this week. This property is not going to remain farmland. It's not. It might be 4, 5, 6, 7 years down the road, but it's not going to remain farmland. And we all know that residential subdivisions and development, they don't pay for themselves. We've had that discussion over the last 13 to 14 years. That property is going to be developed. So I want to continue to be open-minded and listen and gather facts. And I hope, and again, I don't mean this as an insult, but I want to get more knowledge. So thank you.
Thank you.
Judge, I'm sorry. Called you Judge. Sorry, Mayor.
Oh, I've been called worse in my life. Go ahead.
It's okay.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Do we know the revenue from this last fiscal year from Lanes Run Business Park?
I can.
No, it's there. Can it be shared with somebody so I can get that information?
Sure.
Please?
Yeah, I think we've got a list going. I think Emily's been writing on her hand all the things that we need to put together for you all in terms of information. So yes, we'll pull that together.
Yeah, and we'll get that to you.
The reason I ask is this. Yes, 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 jobs, 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 period. But if that revenue was, I don't know, let's just say 15 million, and we divided that by half goes to the county, half to the city, and 5% goes to the school. If we take that revenue and multiply that out by 15%, that's what we'd be getting from this particular business park. We need jobs, but from the regional perspective, we'd get 15% of what we'd be getting from Lanes Run Business Park if the land mass is basically equal. So instead of that 50% city county, we'd be getting about 15% from. I'm just concerned about the regional, but I know there's benefits in doing the regional too, but I'm just struggling a bit with that.
I would just welcome you. I know we're closing up here. If you have questions that have not been answered in the sense of kind of that administrative lane, please send those to Mayor Jenkins, and that we could take a look at that and explore the options and try to get answers to those, or explore like options and alternatives for those. If you don't ask us the questions, we can't necessarily look into those because we're not all thinking in the same way, right? And that's the beauty of why we're here when having this discussion. You all have different backgrounds, you have different interests you're representing. We just need to hear from you all so that we can take these things into consideration, advocate for the project in an effective way. So then moving forward, as we have more updates on this regional economic development project, we can bring those back.
Can you provide a summation of the questions that we have to council that's come up tonight?
Give me a chance to type them up.
And can we get the presentation as
Yes,
well?
yeah,
Okay.
that'll be distributed as well.
Yeah.
All right.
Awesome.
Thank you. And once again, moving forward, great conversation that we had that, again, Judge Covington,
One more thing.
One more
Just
thing.
so everybody understands, along what you just said, Mark, looking at dates, July 27th is the date that the option agreement has to be exercised. And we have a 6-month additional option that we can exercise. It's $100,000 that goes towards the purchase price. But, I want everybody to understand that is a hard requirement. Just that way everybody knows. And that was along your lines of, and in my opinion, we need to have a vision before the month's out about, yes, we're moving forward with this. And let me go back. We are so blessed here. We have, a beautiful community. We love this community. We have so many opportunities, but we're challenged too. And these are not easy decisions. But I would ask you to think about the big picture, the long-term gain and the long-term benefit. And I appreciate your all's time.
once again.
Thank you, Judge. Thank you, sir.
Once again, thank you, Judge Covington, for coming and being part of this conversation. Thank you, Council. I know there's a lot of questions that needs to be addressed,
Mayor.
and you all had some questions
Mayor.
that we hope to find answers to.
Do we
Yes.
need a recess?
We need a recess?
Good.
Okay, I guess everybody's good. But anyway, so I just want to say that I appreciate it. Again, Judge Covington coming and council with questions. We will work diligently to get those questions answered to you, get the information you need, and we will continue to give you updates as we progress on this project. Going forward, next, we have council committee reports. We have police.
Oh, wait a second. We had a police committee that met July 1st, 2024. In attendance, myself, CAO Golden, City Attorney Buttram, Council Member Stone, Chief Allgood, Captain Lodel, City Clerk Tracy Hoffman, and Director of Public Works Robert Bruin. Minutes were approved. Current staffing report was 68 of 73 positions filled. Officer Alicia Gregory was recently sworn in. Recruiting, as the new budget and salary numbers begin in July, new recruiting efforts will begin again in earnest. Job fair at Georgetown College, plans for other significant outreach to other regional places. The chief said that with the decisions with salary equalization that have been made, we are in a much better position to recruit. So not only recruit, but retain. So that's good news. Again, we don't know that will happen, but we're in a better position than we were. Body-worn camera update. Captain Lodel has said that it's ongoing. It's been much more labor-intensive than you could imagine to get everything into all of the vehicles and to get all of the IT required. Alan James is the body-worn camera administrator, and they need to possibly or probably tweak the original contract because of the increase in officers, and therefore there will be a need to increase the purchase of more licenses in the future. Open records requests are going to go through Lieutenant Don Mather and Administrator Alan James, both of whom will get that information then and records to the City Clerk, Tracy Hoffman. I asked about the security on the camera information and the data that's being downloaded, and Axon is who we go through, and they encrypt it, and it should be secure. SRO positions were discussed. Thankfully, all of those positions will be filled by the start of school, and they want to keep, if at all possible, the officers that have already been working inside of the schools. Since they've built up relationships, they'd like to keep that as stable as possible. City Attorney Buttram then presented a draft of a new article of Chapter 38 of the Georgetown Code of Ordinances regarding special events. And we've been talking about special events quite a bit here in City Council. This will be guidelines for, and this is just a draft, and we want input. There's nothing final. Guidelines for the issuance of special events permits to regulate the event's impact. Among other things, talking about street closures, sidewalks, alleys, use of the city park, how we can best make decisions that will keep everyone safe and during parades, etc. The application process for an event, the legal requirement for permits, the scheduling of such events, public works involvement, that's why Charlie Bruin was there giving input, safety issues, how to let the public and the businesses, especially downtown, know, all of those things. Penalties for non-compliance, etc. General discussion. As follow-up to the earlier police committee discussions about keep people safe, especially during parades, we're trying to see whether or not some of our ARPA funds can be redirected to purchase plastic barriers, for lack of a better term. We're discussing with tourism and other city departments about how to best do that. We talked about the efficiency and the success of the capture of the fugitive with all the different partners working in coordination with each other, and Chief Allgood said the effort was well organized. He mentioned in the future it might be good to try to secure some grants for things that would be helpful in the future, like a Bearcat and a drone as a first responder program might be able to give us. So with no further business, we adjourned at about 15. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Next, we have fire. Do we have fire committee?
Mrs. Brent and I, along with our city attorney and our CAO, had our fire committee meeting on June 27th. I'll just go over a couple of the high points that I think we as a body need to be aware of. At the present, well, I guess there's several other retirements that are either already happening or getting ready to happen. So we're looking at 7, potentially as many as 8 openings with retirements, and also a couple, I think maybe 1 or 2 vacancies at the present time. So this is the impressive number to me. It was a little sad to hear so many people are retiring, but those firefighters have earned it. 78 applicants, and that was as of last week. 78 applicants. Chief Thompson and his command staff are looking to hold the written test next week, and then if everything goes well, beginning the interview process during that first week of August. But again, some of the changes that we as a body have made have helped drive that number of 78 applicants. And it very well could have increased some over the past 4, 5, 6 days, even with the holiday last week. Chief Thompson has a plan. I know our city human resource director and the mayor are working with Chief Thompson and his staff on a plan to on promotions and trying to manage overtime the best they can over the next several months until this next recruit class finishes. So another positive, the training center should be ready to go for this next fire training class, which I think is outstanding news, to be able to do all of the training here instead of having to go outside of Georgetown or Scott County. And I think that's it in a nutshell. So there's some other items, but those, to me, those were the big items.
And
thanks, Mayor.
Yeah, and I want to follow up with a comment with that. This council, went ahead and had the mindset to help with recruiting for the fire and police through various training avenues. But with the fire department, by us putting that training station in place, that was a big recruiting tool for them. And it seemed to be paid off. And we're talking with Chief Thompson because of having their own place to which to train. And to me, that's a plus, and this council needs to be commended for that, for having the foresight to ensure that happens. So, moving right on. Thank you. I think that was the last one. We do not have Public Works. So, next we have the Georgetown Municipal Water Sewer Service.
Thank you,
Chance,
Mayor.
you're up.
We have 4 items for your consideration tonight. And the first is a purchase order for Brentag. This is in the amount of $11,205. This is for 4,500 gallons of sodium hypochlorite, which is our primary disinfectant at the water plant, as you can read in the purchase order. This is budgeted. This is month to a month and a half supply. We budget for this on that time period, that usage throughout the year in our annual budget, and this comes from our annual chemical bid that we do, unit price contract. So this is a bid price. This is our lowest price available at the time from our bidding, and the lowest that we can shop currently. So we are asking for your consideration of this purchase order.
Motion, Mayor.
Motion made by Mr. Allen. Second made by Ms. Tackett. Are there further questions and or comments? All those in favor of Brenton Mid-South for $11,205 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say likewise. Let the record reflect the motion passed. Next, item B, ESR.
Yep, this is a purchase order for Esri. This is a software purchase for $11,770. This is our annual licensing fee for our mapping software. Point out this one software integrates into all of our other softwares, our billing software, our work order software, our camera inspection software. Pretty much everything we do goes through Esri's ArcGIS. It's on our phones, our smartphones, tablets that are in the field. So our field staff use this. We use it at the office on our desktops, and we also share this with P&Z, with engineers, customers, really anybody that wants the public part. We share that. It's a pretty recognized platform. We also share this with state regulatory agency when they request it, being Division of Water. So this is our annual renewal for all of the different licenses, whether it's remote, whether it's on mobile devices, and we're asking you, this is budgeted purchase and through our IT budget, and we're asking for your consideration tonight.
Do I have a motion?
Motion, Mayor.
Motion made by Ms. Tackett.
Second.
Second made by Ms. Hambrick. Are there further questions and or comments?
I have a question, sir.
Yes, sir.
I talked to Chase earlier about this, but I want to bring it before council. PVA has a software, and it does something similar, and they have paid for this, and they're giving it out to planning and zoning, police, fire, the city engineer uses it. The school system uses it. So I know that this request tonight is for renewing of the contract, and I'm going to support that. But I would like to say, going forward, I'd like to see if GMWSS can convert over to Eagle View, and we can combine all this into one. We won't have to deal with the renewing of the contract with Esri.
I think we can certainly look into that, and as we talked, I appreciate the support tonight, knowing that looking at changing something that integrates through so many programs, that's a pretty intense analysis to make sure we can do that without any bugs or that could disrupt, especially the billing or work order systems. So definitely something that we can look into, and if it's a place where we can find financial efficiencies and efficiencies across different area governmental organizations, I'm all for it.
Any other questions and or comments? All those in favor of ESRI for $11,770 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say likewise.
Thank you.
Let the record reflect that the motion passed. Next, item C, Clark Electrical.
Yep, this is next purchase for $11,897. This is for a complete rebuild of one of our pumps at the KU pump station, which is located in Stamping Ground. Every bit of wastewater collected in the collection system in Stamping Ground goes through this pump station and then into wastewater treatment plant 3, which you never hear anything about. That is the satellite treatment facility that's in Stamping Ground and serves Stamping Ground. We've had a really good track record over the years with pump rebuilds versus buying new. I priced both in the purchase order, so you can see that's for your consideration tonight. This is paid for through, it's not a specific line item. We have a O&M budget within our collection department, all of our operations department, and we utilize those for the throughout the year for where we have needs arise. This pump has to be replaced, and so we're recommending the rebuild versus the new at the cost differential, and we generally don't ever have any issues with Clark Electric on pump rebuilds. So we're recommending this for your approval.
Do you have a motion?
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Stone, second made by Mr. Hampton. Are there further questions and or comments? All those in favor of the motion of Clark Electrical for $11,897 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say likewise. Next, item D, Petco.
Yep, this is our last item. This is for Petco in the amount of $15,554. Every year or every other year, we do need to clean out the settling basins at the water treatment plant. We're not cleaning the spring or the channel this time. This is just the concrete basins, and those have to be cleaned. Sediment builds up. It decreases our efficiency at drawing water out for treatment at the plant. Perfect time of year to do this is right now because the flow out of the spring is pretty low, so we're buying a lot of water from the plant board anyways. We did receive 3 quotes. I think Petco and Leak did this last time. I think Petco did it the time before, so they kind of duked it out on price with Petco coming in low bid. This is a budgeted item through our water treatment plant operational budget through operation and maintenance, and we're recommending this for your approval as well.
Do I have a motion?
Motion, Mayor.
Motion made by Mr. Allen. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second made by Ms. Tackett.
There you go.
All those in favor of the motion, all in favor of the motion of Petco for $15,554 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say likewise.
Thank you. Thank you for your time tonight.
Next is item number 9. We have our Director of Affordable Housing and Homeless Prevention quarterly update, Ms. Candace Whitehouse. And she's going to give us some homework. Thank you, Candace, for coming.
Yeah. All right. Well, as you all can see there, I'm not going to read to you, but I'll hit some highlights. The housing needs assessment is underway. We are currently, from the document that we were given in the beginning, we're currently, I think, submerged into task 3. So project kickoff and existing material review is task 1, demographic and economic baseline was task 2, and so now they are in the midst of housing market analysis and gathering data from different sources of in the community. Today they were emailing with Lori about short-term rentals and the data around that, and then I'm working on trying to help them get some long-term rentals. So lots of data that's being collected. That's where we are right now. We are also, I'm working closely with Heather at the gathering place to make sure that the White Flag Shelter, or hopefully what we'll soon be calling the Low Barrier Shelter, is still moving forward. We did officially get notification that we did get funding from Toyota of $125,000 to construct a new building for them so that we can expand the services that would happen at the Low Barrier Shelter. So that's a huge next step. So Heather is working on moving that forward there. The networking group that's happening once a month is, like I've said, every month, or every time I've come, it's every third Thursday at 8 a.m. at Scott County Library. Last month we had Adrienne Bush from the Homeless and Housing Coalition of Kentucky come and speak. It was very a high-quality speaker for our local nonprofits and human services to hear from. They learned a lot about what's going on statewide and how that affects us locally, and things that we can be doing to be proactive here locally for the unhoused population. A lot of people asked really great questions during that time. We have Kentucky Housing Corporation, Danielle Clore, is coming next month, and so we're very excited to have her. She is an extremely, I think, just people want to hear from her in our state, and so to have her in the room is going to be a big win for us and our human services and nonprofits. And you all are welcome to attend those if you would like. And you can see there the other things that I've been doing in the community. I did do a presentation at Women in Business. Michelle Carlisle and I were asked to do a presentation on what the journey from unhoused or homeless to housed looks like. And they only gave us like 30 minutes, so we squished everything into that amount of time. But we were able to kind of outline what that looks like and all of the different barriers that are standing in front of folks. We actually called it the real life chutes and ladders or something like that. And so that went over really well, and we've already been requested to come and give that presentation a few different places. Because I think a lot of people just don't understand how hard it is to rise above being unhoused or being in severe poverty, and the different steps and the different barriers that people are facing are having to work through, and the ways that our system is kind of, well, I'm not going to give you the presentation right now, but system is kind of against some folks when they're trying to move out of that. So I think that went over really well. A lot of great business people were able to hear about that in that room. I'm working on a landlord database that we will be able to use for multiple projects moving forward. So that's something that I'm working on. Other projects I have listed there, with Karen, the new grant administrator, we are looking at some CDBG grant funding and possibilities for our community with that resource. She is highly experienced in that, so very grateful to have her on board. And we're also together looking at the National Endowment for Arts to try and come up with a solution for some bus shelters that makes sense for the people utilizing them, and that they stay safe and they stay a place where they can be in shelter and not have, I don't know, different advertisements or things that could be predatory for them. So making sure that those shelters are the best choices for our community and looking at grant options for those. And yes, if anybody has questions, I think happy to answer those.
Candace, quick question. Timing on the housing needs assessment is when? September?
It's 6 months was from the beginning.
I can't remember when the beginning was.
Yeah. So it would be around November, December.
I kind of want to just toot Candace's horn really quickly. That last item you'll see on the reporting, that last column is Economic and Education Affairs Chamber Subcommittee. Candace is in the community a lot, and I think that's one of the most positive things to just help keep that ball rolling. So that funding through Toyota That initiated with conversations with Toyota's representative there. Toyota, as you all may know, does pretty extensive community funding for eligible projects, and getting that conversation going and pulling the right people to the table. The funding might not always go through Candace's office, but working with those partners to get that funding and then seeing how we can pile on top of that funding with other opportunities is something that I think is going to pay off, especially as House Bill 5 has progressed and the treatment of the unhoused population it looks a little different now. So just wanted to commend her for being creative there.
All right. Any questions?
I do have one. Can you explain to me Kentucky Housing Corporation ESG grant?
Oh, yes, sorry, I did mean to touch on that. So that is when I wasn't here, and I think Devin spoke on it, I was in Owensboro at the Groundswell Summit, actually, but we did put an application in for the ESG grant. Part of that funding would be for emergency shelter funds, so that would go for the low barrier shelter at the gathering place, and the other part was for rapid rehousing funds, and that was the larger part of the grant. So rapid rehousing is something that I talked about last fall. This is a different stream of funding for that, and it's getting unhoused folks into housing as fast as possible, utilizing that funding to get them into any open units that we have here in Scott County. And they can be short-term or medium or long-term rental assistance, but the goal is to try to get them off of that assistance and being able to afford their housing on their own. So if we get that funding, we will be partnering with the Gathering Place again they would be providing the case management, and we would do the grant management and the landlord relations and kind of the behind the scenes.
So in essence, that means that moving forward, if you get that grant and you get people into housing, then you also help them find jobs and that kind of thing in order to stay in their home.
Yes, so
correct?
a big point of the program that Gathering Place would be offering, and a requirement in the grant is increasing their income, whether that's employment or unearned income.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Candace, I know Councilman Allen had asked the question about just estimates on how many families might be able to be served if we were fully funded through the federal funding and the match, and I know you got ballparks there.
Yes. So I talked to Tish Shoup. She has been providing this program in Clark County for many years. And with the amount of funding that we applied for, we would be able to have around 12 households that we would be able to assist during that grant period. And by household, I don't know what that would look like, and that number can change depending on if we have a lot of people who just need it short term, then we could, assist them longer, or more people, sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, Candace, once again, thank you for your due diligence work. I mean, coming in, hitting the ground running like you have, I can see that, we can see there is some progression being made, and, we're also being able to service people that are in need, or at least getting them to the table. Yeah. And one thing you're doing, I think, extremely well is getting all the other nonprofits together and working with them and kind of like channeling all this resources, so that when people who need help, we have a point of contact that we can go to and get these people taken care of. Once again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Candace.
Item number 10, second reading of the amendment to the fireworks ordinance. Sponsors Willow Hambrick and Millie Butcher Conway.
An ordinance amending Chapter 16, Article 5 of the Georgetown Code of Ordinances regarding the regulation of fireworks. Summary 1. Amend Section 16-124 to change the dates on which fireworks may be used, ignited, fired, or exploded within city limits. 2. Provides for repeal of inconsistent ordinances, severability of provisions, and effective date upon passage of publication according to law. The full text of this ordinance is available for examination in the City Clerk's Office, 629 North Broadway, Georgetown, Kentucky 40324, or at www.georgetownky.gov. Introduced and publicly read the first time June 24th, 2024. Publicly read the second time July 8th, 2024.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion made by Ms. Hambrick. Do I have a second? Second made by Ms. Conway. Are there questions and or comments?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
I need some clarification on number 1. I apologize, I wasn't here when that was talked about, but it's talking about change the dates on which fireworks may be used, ignited, fired, or exploded within city limits. Could I get clarification on that, please?
Yes, can we get clarification on that?
I believe it's the third floor.
I'm just pulling it up so I don't misspeak. Give me 1 second.
Is blowing it up.
I
Blowing
am.
it up.
Yes. Funny, funny, funny.
No pun intended.
Give me 1 second.
Dun-dun-dun.
You got it? Sorry. Computer issues. So for section 1, so currently the way the ordinance is written today, technically fireworks are allowed to be used any day of the year. What differs between like today, for example, and then like the 4th of July is the time of the day in which they can be used, if that makes sense. So the first section here, basically, when it's limiting the days of the week, it is limiting the day that you could lawfully or legally ignite or use a firework in Georgetown to the 4th of July, July 3rd, and then the date specifically named or designated by the city is the date to celebrate. So sometimes, depending on the day of the week that the 4th of July falls on, the city could designate another date to celebrate the holiday, or if there's a weather event that might disrupt 4th of July, and then New Year's Eve. Those would be the only 4 days of the year that you could use fireworks, and it would be between the hours of 10 a.m. and midnight. Does that clarify?
It does. I was concerned about, the rain and things like this, and just like this 4th of July landed on Thursday, which was a great evening for it, but then a lot of people had to work on Friday, so they celebrated on Saturday. So I'm just wondering, the way you're saying that it's written is that the council would come back and say, okay, so the 4th of July lands on Friday next year, so they can only shoot off on Friday night.
So this language is already in the current, this is language that's not new. This is how it's already written. The council does have the ability to designate the day that the 4th of July would be recognized here in Georgetown. So if they wanted to designate another day to identify that this day is included in the day that you would be able to shoot fireworks and that sort of thing, the council could do that.
So it's my understanding, to make sure that we clear that. So if we decide that, like it was on a Thursday, and this council decided, okay, a rain event occurred, and so let's do this on Saturday. So this council can make that policy to do it on that Saturday. Is that correct?
I mean, I think the normal practice would be as the holiday approaches, the council would say in June or whatever time, they would say 4th of July falls on a Wednesday this year. We, the council, want to assign Saturday, July 7th, 8th, whatever that date might be as the date, in addition to the 4th, the 3rd and the 4th, as a date that fireworks can be discharged. So it's something that, it's similar, even though trick or treat ends up getting set for the 31st every year. It's similar to how the council sets trick or treat. Except for this would be codified. Like Emily said, the council still can designate a day to celebrate under the current ordinance, but this just limits the discharge of fireworks to those 4 dates.
My subdivision canceled because of rain and rescheduled for September. Is that going to be an issue? Sounds like it is. It's scheduled for Labor Day. But if council doesn't say that's an appropriate date, I don't think they're going to be able to do it. Based on this.
Yeah, I believe, if I understand that correctly.
So the way this ordinance is written, the effective date, there's not an effective date set in the future for this. So as written, there's not something that says this change in the law, if passed, would go in effect January 1st or January 2nd of next year. You could add that language to, set when you would want it to come into effect. But if this passes in real time, as ordinances typically do, even though you, as a neighborhood, maybe selected a date in the future, that could be impacted by this, and shooting fireworks on a day that's not permitted under the ordinance would technically be against the law.
All right.
So Mayor, if I could,
Yes.
Who's going to enforce this? They're already tied up enough as it is. Who's going to enforce this? And technically, it shouldn't fall to them, should fall to the fire department, and you've got one fire marshal to go out and do it. So you're going to put all that on one person?
So under the ordinance, we've not been asked to amend the enforcement piece of this. We've just been asked to look at the time and the days of the year. So if that is something you would like further investigation, staff can look at that and we can consider amending the ordinance. I think currently the way enforcement works is citizens have to call and report a violation, or if one of our officers, whether it be a member of the fire department or a police officer, they see it in real time, citizens have to call somebody to report, and that would be the non-emergency line. So enforcement is hard on this topic because by the time they get there, a lot of times activity stopped. It's hard. So,
I think my question to this is that this is going to try to keep people from shooting off fireworks, say Monday to Thursday, because that's what they do. That's what they've done this past year. And then we hear them on Thursday and Friday and then Saturday, and then I didn't hear any Sunday, so it's over with. So we're expecting the police department, my understanding is if whoever calls in, that it's going to be a non-emergency because there's going to be emergencies. It's going to already be looked at. So by the time an officer does get over there, it's done. So in essence, we're punishing people that are doing it the right way because of people that don't, basically.
So how do you enforce it?
Yeah, how do you enforce it?
And
How do you-
Either way.
how do you educate the community that they can or cannot do when the timing is you can do it, when the timing is you cannot do it?
But I think that's the same issue we're dealing with now. It's tough to enforce right now. You got people firing them off. I'll give you a good example. In my neighborhood, they were firing them off last Sunday.
Right.
And I'm not talking about firing them off at some decent hour. This is 1 o'clock in the morning. They're blowing the places up. So
I didn't hear 1 o'clock.
yeah, I did. So because and it's a problem.
I don't disagree with that, Mayor.
When it's over, it's over.
But when it's over, it's over. But the thing about it is, it's not any different than speeding or running stop signs. At some point, you have to take that as a consideration that you're to obey the law. There's people out there that do, and the ones that don't is the reason why the ones that do are being punished. So I don't see reasoning for this. So in essence, I can't support that.
I'm in full support of this, respectfully.
Absolutely.
Heretofore, correct me if I'm wrong, you could shoot them off on any day of the year, the way the ordinance was the last time. before
Right,
we made this?
subject to all the other laws
All
and.
subject to state law and everything else. And state law, are we enforcing that? I mean, we should be. There should be an enforcement of, you're not supposed to be able to shoot them off within 200 feet of any structure, and you're supposed to pick up your debris. This is state law, not local ordinance. And so, how are we doing with our sign ordinances in enforcement? How are we doing with our noise ordinances? How are we doing with our speeding? Better now that we have a traffic. But I think we also have to have a framework that gives respect. And we're saying on these days, these are the days designated unless city council augments the days because of weather or other opportunities to be able to do it. So I don't see that we're punishing anyone.
I understand what you're saying, Ms. Hambrick, but the bottom line is it's done. Now you don't hear it.
I heard it last night across the street.
I didn't. But it's just, it's like the remnants of whatever. I just never have seen it as a problem.
Well, last night, just as an example, and this is a personal example, I have a 21-month-old grandchild in the bedroom that faced the fireworks that were going off for an hour and a half across the street, quite loud, within 200 feet of my property. Obviously, this wasn't passed yet, so they're perfectly within their rights to do it. As far as I can tell, my granddaughter got so scared that she climbed out of her crib and fell on her head, frightened. So I've had 5 people call me about enforcement that we're talking about just this past week who want to know the protocols for enforcement. And I've said, well, A, respect is the number one thing. People need to be respectful. We're giving a framework. We're trying to advertise. Here are the times that the city is allowing, and here's state law. Please follow it. Obviously, people can call in the non-emergency number and they can report. I hope they do.
Did you?
I did not, because last night, I mean, we haven't passed this yet, right? I mean,
But here's the thing, it's still a state law.
Yeah. You
By
could.
what you're saying, it's still a state law.
right. I
You can
actually
call
was
them
asleep.
enforce it and ask them to enforce it.
So I didn't hear it, but my granddaughter fell out of her crib, and my daughter had to deal with it.
Okay. Mr. Hampton, you had your hand up.
Could someone please clarify the 200-foot rule of any structure? Because based on that,
Most neighborhoods.
out at the county park, there's structures where they light off fireworks. So they would actually be in violation of this ordinance.
Well, not necessarily. That's-
Thank you.
I know what you're going to say, so, but by, yes, it is not structure, but it is a structure. It has a roof over it, from where they shoot the fireworks off, I know they're closer than 200 feet to, some of the other structures out there, the restrooms.
Is the 200 feet in the state statute?
Yes.
Okay, but it's not in ours. But if you add the 200 feet and try to enforce it, that's going to mean no one, even during the designated times, could set off fireworks in a cul-de-sac, on a street or anything, because you're within 200 feet of a structure.
Right.
No, you're right, and I mean, the statute, obviously it's in the statute, I think it's reiterated in our current code, even though it doesn't need to be, because it applies anyways, but I mean, you're not wrong, that almost every use of fireworks in our community is unlawful, so the enforcement question it's all about the enforcement
It comes
question.
down to the enforcement.
And sometimes it can work, but for the most part, resources, you just do your best.
And Emily, legal question. KRS 227, does it say may or shall?
It said, give me 1 second, I'm pulling it up for you.
It's a big difference right there.
We can talk about something else if you'd like.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And to bring up the structure thing of the county park, those guys have the federal firearms license and they are insured and all that. So, they're legal in their shooting them off. But let's say Cherry Blossom and Alonzo's group, they hire someone who is FFL approved and has that, and they go through all the proper steps and they shoot off the fireworks on Labor Day. Is it a may or a shall? So, technically, they would be in violation of a city ordinance, but, in violation of a state law, but where does that fall? Whether we pass it or not tonight, this ordinance, still in violation of state law. Could we set up something to where if that group wants to come in and apply for a special event, that they could have that? Is that something we could do? Absolutely. But this ordinance here, it's great that we're bringing it forward, but I don't mean, it has about as much chance of really stopping it as a piece of paper holding back the Ohio River. Because I don't think it's going to change the ideas. It's still going to be the weeks of the 4th of July. Because whether they go to the fireworks stands, and if you take the fireworks stands away, they're still going to have them, because about 60, 70 miles that way is a fireworks stand in Indiana on I-74. You go south on 75, you got fireworks stands across the state line in Tennessee. Yeah. It's not going to stop it, but you know, the education part. I think we do more of the education part, but I don't see the ordinance changing anything.
I think it can help some. And I think that I think that the fallacy of those kinds of arguments mean, yeah, we're going to have people run stoplights. Yes, we're going to have people violate the noise ordinance. Yes, we're going to have people violate. Do we still want those ordinances? I do. I still want the ordinances written so that people who believe in following things respectfully to their neighbors and their neighborhoods and the destruction of property that's taken place, yes. Cinders are falling. People send me pictures of stuff that's falling on their cars and having to have paint repaired and things. I think it's an important thing to have ordinances, but I respect everybody else's opinion on council.
Emily, did you find the answer to that?
Yes, so it's KRS 227-715, which is requirements for sale of certain consumer fireworks. Subsection 11, a person lawfully possessing consumer fireworks as defined in the statute may use those items if A, he or she is at least 18 years of age, B, fireworks are not ignited within 200 feet of any structure, vehicle, or any other person, and C, use of the fireworks does not place him or her in violation of any lawfully enacted local ordinance. So the language of this, to your question, is the person may use those fireworks if those three conditions are met, and the language does mirror what the local ordinance says.
And piggybacking on that, that's exactly when we did our traffic ordinance. We didn't go all the way into it because we referred back to the KRS statute. That's why our traffic ordinance wasn't as thick as it was, so that we can refer back to this KRS statute as well for the 4th of July and fireworks.
All right. Is there any other discussion on this? We have a motion. Oh, yes.
Raise my hand.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Should it be in there that if events, just like Todd was saying, if there was an event, a request be made? I mean, is that going to open up a huge can of worms for every other?
I think any event can be brought to before this council. You know, we can approve whatever. So,
Any other questions? Any other comments? So we have been properly at a motion and properly second. At this time, we will have a roll call vote. Madam Clerk?
Mrs. Tackett?
No.
Mr. Stone?
no.
Mr. Showalter?
No.
Mr. Hampton?
No.
Mrs. Hambrick?
Yes.
Mrs. Butcher Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
No.
All right. So the motion for the amendment is failed 5-2. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, Chief Administrative Officer Resolution adopting BGADD Title 6 plan.
Yes, so you can review the entire thing in your packet if you'd like, but essentially this resolution is in response to communication from the State Office of Civil Rights, and there's another component, and small business, I believe, is the title of the office. But as a recipient of federal funds through the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, we're required to implement a Title VI plan. So this request came through pre-Karen, but thankfully Karen, along with Patrick, our risk manager, and Megan in HR, have worked together to complete all the steps necessary. The questionnaire in front of you, you will actually see a little slip where you've got a couple questions to ask the elected body members. I know it says board members, but council members in this case are being asked to complete this as a component of the questionnaire. So you don't need to identify yourself on it, but if you'd please complete that and then hand that over at the end of the meeting to help us complete that questionnaire. The other component is adoption of a Title VI implementation plan. Luckily, the Bluegrass Area Development District put together a pretty comprehensive plan that local governments within its district could adopt. So that's the plan that's in front of you tonight for adoption. So once we complete this, we'll continue to maintain good standing for that funding and future funding.
All right.
You need a motion for
Yes, I do.
Motion.
Motion is made by Ms. Tackett. Do I have a second? Second made by Mr. Allen. All those in, do you have questions and comments? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I have a comment. I did read through it all. I noticed that the board does not have any minorities, the governing board, which for this kind of, bluegrass area development plan that includes housing, that includes transportation, that includes a lot of things that affect most vulnerable minority, populations. I don't know how that can be, why aren't there any minorities on the board?
That's probably a question I can't answer, so we can.
I just find that problematic and surprising as I read through it. Now, the members, there's the governing board and then there's the membership. And the membership, if I remember correctly, I think there's 5 to 7% minority members. But the governing board itself, which makes the big deal decisions, has no minorities. I just thought that was important information to bring out and maybe a concern to bring back to the board.
Yeah, we can absolutely document that concern and submit it to the ad, just, in the scope of this conversation.
Thank you.
Okay, so we had a motion and a second. Are there any other questions and or comments? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say likewise. Let the record reflect the motion carried. Sorry.
Yep. Just one more point there. Notice there are 2 different sections to select. So under the ethnicity section and the race section, just to make sure they do prefer that that folks self-complete these forms. So we don't want to complete them for you, obviously, but you can make sure to complete both of those. Thank you. You can do it.
All right, thank you. Next, item number 12, which is the city engineer, municipal order contract renewal with leak eliminators. These are the ones that clean out our storm drains and all those, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So this is a contract that we already have with leak eliminators. They do a lot of sewer service work, clean out drains, and a lot of repair work that needs to be done in the system. And we have a bid out unit price contract that was bid in 2021 with an annual renewal clause in there, and they're holding their prices. Agreed to do that, and I'm asking for a continuance. It expired actually June 30th, so we're asking for a renewal of the agreement for another year.
Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Motion made by Mr. Stone. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second made by Ms. Tackett. Are there further questions and or comments? All those in favor of the motion for the contract renewal with leak eliminators signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say likewise. Let the record reflect the motion passed. Next we have, thank you, sir. Next we have human resources. And on human resources, A, we have municipal order, renewal of liability, property, and workers' compensation insurance. All right. Mr. Patrick, you want to come on up and tell us a little bit about that?
Certainly, Mayor, Council. The past year, we've seen some significant increases in our property values as they were appraised back in 2022. And then again, we've added some additional property and values. So you know that the windstorms and the flooding over the last couple of years have taken a significant toll on the funds for the insurance companies, so they brought it back to us as a part of the market share. So That went up about 49% this past year for our premiums. The liability portion, again, it went up as a result of payroll increases. We added some additional officers. We have some unarmed and untrained officers. The cyber liability premium has also been added in this year. And so our overall exposures for different things like that has increased our liability cost by about 8.9%. Fortunately, our workers' compensation cost has only gone up 1.1%, and our mod rate for that has gone down significantly to 0.9. So we're doing very good in that area of workers' compensation, keeping our employees safe. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you. All right. Yes, I need a motion. Motion made by Mr. Allen. Do I have a second? Second made by Mr. Hampton. Are there further questions and or comments?
That's, yes, sir.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
There's nothing I can do about it, but man, Patrick, that's painful, Patrick.
I understand. I went to the market for my own homeowner's insurance this past year, and it's gone up significantly as well. So I'm a part of that market share of people having to pay the cost of living in a home or owning property. We did increase our deductible slightly for inland marine equipment and property from like $2,500 to $5,000 per loss. The only loss we had last year was the windstorm that took out part of the fire department maintenance shed and our dugouts. We got that all covered by insurance and paid, but that was the only event that we had to pay a deductible on. As far as auto deductible, we left that where it's at. The workers' compensation deductibles, we're leaving them where they're at as well. So it's just part of the market share, and it's not much we can do about it. Talked to our broker, and they said that our overall premium increase was about 15.6% for this coming year. For the market, for like school properties and other entities, it's gone up 25 to 40%. They said they're delivering some bad news to a lot of people. So I feel very fortunate that we only went up 15.6%.
I will commend you on the mod rate, though, for workers' comp, 0.9. It's really good.
I'm happy about that.
Yes.
Very happy.
All right. Is there any further questions and or comment? All those in favor of the motion, municipal order renewing the liability, property, and workers' compensation insurance, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say likewise. Thank you. Next, item B, first reading of the amendment to the personnel ordinance. Sponsors Millie Butcher Conway and Connie Tackett.
This amendment is simply a small reorganization for the Public Works Department. Since they eliminated sanitation, they don't have as high a need for drivers as they do employees who just work for the city and taking care of smaller maintenance tasks. So Robert has asked that we eliminate one driver spot and turn it into a worker spot. So that's all you have on this ordinance. There was also that small part where we changed the total head count. And that's just a matter of sometimes people say, well, Megan, what are your strengths and weaknesses? And I say, sometimes my weakness is math. But I will guarantee you that in my process, I take the personnel ordinance and I say I'm supposed to have X number of police officers, and I create a master list that I then plug names into. So that's how I keep myself on track with not hiring too many and constantly knowing what our openings are for us.
At this time, Madam Clerk.
An ordinance amending Section 2-60 of the Code of Ordinances regarding personnel. Summary 1. Amends Exhibit B of Section 2-60, subsection C of the Code of Ordinances to decrease the number of maintenance driver positions from 6 to 5 and increase the number of maintenance worker positions from 9 to 10 within the Public Works Department, and to clarify total authorized position counts created by ordinance versus state law. 2, provides for repeal of inconsistent ordinances, severability of provisions, and an effective date upon passage and publication. The full text of this ordinance is available for examination in the City Clerk's Office, 629 North Broadway, Georgetown, Kentucky, 40324, or at www.georgetownky.gov. Introduced and publicly read for the first time July 8, 2024.
Any other questions or comments to this? Okay. Next, we'll move on to the Police Department. Municipal order for surplus items.
Motion made.
I need a,
No representation.
Where is he?
That would be Lewis.
Lewis.
Mr. Mayor, that's for 2 segways that we have, where you'd like to auction those off.
thank you.
Yes, sir. That's for 2 segways that we have. We'd like to auction them off. They're 15 years old. They're antiquated, and getting parts for them are going to be outdated, so.
All right, and now I need a motion.
Motion, Mayor.
Motion made by Mr. Stone, second by Ms. Tackett. Are there further questions and/or comments? All those in favor of the motion for the police department for municipal order for surplus items signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say likewise. Next, we have the fire department, thank you. Resolution for the Walmart Community Grant.
So I'll cover this one for Assistant Chief Johnson, and this is something that as we update our financial policies that we'll hopefully take care of and streamline some of these things with these smaller grants. But Assistant Chief Johnson applied for the Walmart Sparks Good Local Grant Funding Program, and they were awarded $2,000 for materials to be used in community safety education. So very small grant, but our policy requires that council accept even $1. So that's pretty straightforward.
All right, do you have a motion?
Motion, man.
Motion made by Mr. Allen. Do I have a second? Second made by Ms. Conway. Are there further questions and/or comments? All those in favor of the motion, fire department resolution to accept the Walmart Community Grant, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say likewise. Let the record reflect that the motion passed. Item number 16, we're going to go with the council comments, and I'm going to start with Mr. Stone, looking right at you, so I'll let you start.
Thank you, sir. I've had a citizen call me, and I went over to their house over in Habitat Village. Trash truck is driving through their yard and has encroached way into it. Normally, I mean, we could fix it, but the issue with it, there is I think it's a gas line shut off, or a sewer line shut off, one of the two, right there in that curve where they're driving over top of, and I think we need to look at that. Maybe figure out another way for them to get in there and make their turns and without driving into his yard.
You said what was the address again?
I don't.
Habitat 100? Someone like, I think I've received something of that.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Mason?
Yes, sir, I did.
Yeah,
I received that.
yeah, and I can send you the picture that I
I've
went
got
over
it.
and took, but yeah.
I've got it.
it's,
What I'll do is I will forward it on to the
Okay,
public.
and then another thing we need to look at, and it was brought up here tonight, a committee or group with, include business owners, citizens, and some council members. We need to seriously look at the parking issues in downtown. And, be it, even if it means that, look at the parking issues, the enforcement, even if we need to even go so far as to create a parking authority or look at privately funded structures for more parking in the downtown area. So that's something that we definitely need to look at. And then, great meeting tonight, a lot of spirited discussion on the economic development program. And then, so that's all I got. Thank you all.
Mr. Allen?
Yes, the congratulations to the firefighters that were promoted and pinned tonight, so I know they've already left. Also, the fire training center, is there a plan to use that training center to train firefighters outside of Scott County in charge of any type of cost to them?
I will look at that.
Okay, because that could be a small revenue that could offset some cost within that department. Judge Joe Pat set a date for us, July 27th, which is the option agreement for the land. And we will have another meeting prior to that, which will be on the 22nd.
Mhm.
Will there be council opportunities to continue to discuss this matter at hand? And prior to that meeting, if we could get a summary of the concerns and a response to the concerns, that I think will better prepare us coming into that meeting for discussion. 'Cause
Okay, we will.
it's a little hard just to start throwing it out, you know, at that time. So if we could get that in advance, that would be good.
Right.
And that's all I have.
Ms. Tackett?
As far as the regional business park, you know, they had talked about whether or not there were other communities within Kentucky, Commonwealth, that was doing that. But I have the understanding that there's other states that are doing it. So maybe we could get some information from regional parks that way that would help with our understanding for this one. And then the second thing, could we revisit as far as parking goes? Can you tell us when the pavilion's going to be finished and how much longer we have on City Hall, and revisit the parking area down there where the center of town was and make it more like we were talking about milling and stuff, and create more parking there, and maybe even look over there off of Water Street next to the church. We have, the city owns some property right there that you really can't do anything with, and Public Works mows it all the time. That maybe we could look at some parking there, for like people could, you know, walk to Galvin's and stuff like that. Just to throw that out, just some ideas.
Yeah, and speaking on that, I took part in the parade, and as I was leaving, I went down through downtown. You know, of course, there was a lot of people at the parade, and the center of town where we paved was full. So it was being used, and even so, the behind the Scott County Museum, which is another public parking facility, which was used. So I do agree there is a need, and we will look at some options with that.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yep.
That's all I have. Thanks.
Ms. Conway?
And I noticed that too, with the parade, those two areas you're talking about, they were utilizing. And I don't know if striping it, we talked about that one time too, whether that would make more spots and better utilization of the area or not. But we do need some more, and I don't know how much longer, you know, it'll be a while before the pavilion's done. And
We'll get that information to you. We'll try to get you some hard dates. We'll get you some hard dates. Ms. Hamburg?
Thank you, Mayor. I think if possible, if we could put the slide presentation from the Economic Development Plan on our city website, as well as the answers to the questions. And just as a reminder, I requested that if we could get answers to the citizen questions and not just council questions, I would think that it would be good to try to get as many of those put up on our city website as well, because I think more information allows us to make best decisions going forward. The one thing I didn't say about the body-worn cameras is they'll probably go live mid-July, and police chief said that he would intend on coming to council just to explain how they're going to be used in the implementation. And I think a lot of people in the public will be interested in that. When is the demolition going to be taking place on that green building next to the creek? If we could find that out.
Yeah, we'll put that down
It's
and find out.
increasingly a hazard. And how much longer do we know is the lot next to it is a veritable, I mean, it went from just a few thick structures to huge gravel, and then there's mounds of tar, and do we have a time?
We will look into that and find out.
Because we could be doing something else with that land, and I don't think they're paying us anything to use it.
I will look into that and get back.
Okay.
Report back to you.
That's it.
Okay. Mr. Hampton?
Excuse me. Thanks, Mayor. Just a couple of things. Again, thanks for the update on the regional economic development situation. And, you know, I think there's been a lot of questions tonight and some answers, but I think there's still a lot more out there that we need answered. You know, it's going to be a big decision, you know, for us, how we approach this, you know, keeping in mind, I think the number one priority is the city of Georgetown and the residents of Scott County, making sure that we take care of their needs and services, and just the well-good of the community itself. My last thing is just congratulations to the firefighters that were pinned tonight. They've done a really excellent job, and we're just proud of what they do for us.
Okay, Mr. Showalter, what did you close it out?
And I apologize for coughing. I got choked. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
While you were talking. Congratulations to our firefighters. I can't see a proud father, but congratulations to Mr. and Mrs. Bruin. I know I'm not supposed to do this, but I want to get my hand slapped, but I noticed it tonight coming into the council meeting as I was driving on 25. I'll look this way so I don't single Eddie at me and get my hand slapped. The turn lane on Colony Boulevard, it's looking pretty good. It's looking pretty good.
You can say that.
It's almost there.
Possibly, you can say that.
And then last thing, when you're talking about parking, I don't know where the county is on breaking ground for the new Justice Building. I'm hoping it's after the pavilion is finished, because if you think it's bad now, just wait. So hopefully at least the pavilion will be completed before that happens. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Mayor, I have one more question, and it's to pertaining to body cams. Do you know if whether or not they're going to order body cams for however many officers that we have slotted to hire versus what we already
I
have?
think it was 73.
Okay.
They're what the process is they're going to, right now they're ordering enough for every officer, okay, with others. Now, what is going to happen is that there's going to have to be a second round of cameras.
Okay.
And the reason why everybody will have a backup, it's an electronic device. Something happens, it goes down, they gotta have that second one right there, ready to go.
Okay,
So,
good to know.
But it's all a built-in cost. And correct me if I'm wrong, is that not what they told us? Yeah, so yes, it's a big cost, but it's, the benefits pay off in the long run.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Are there any other business to be brought before this council? If not, this meeting is adjourned.